outgoing woman starting the next chapter in her life.
She's just retired, and she was very much focused on the future. Diane was a person that everyone should meet in life. Positive, happy.
But her life is cut short in a night of immeasurable horror.
There was blood splatter everywhere.
I never saw so much trauma to one person's body.
It chills me to the bone.
Police have a complex scene and a long list of suspects.
There was over 100 male contacts in Diane's phone.
There was always drama with boyfriends.
He refused to give DNA. There was something out there that he was hiding. Every direction we followed, we ended up running into dead ends.
Just when police think they might never catch the killer,
Who could it be? Why is this so complicated?
the case takes a mind-blowing turn.
And I was like, what? Oh my God.
No one expected this case to break on something like this.
Union Township, New Jersey. A bustling East Coast community with a small town feel.
Union Township's a mix of mostly suburban, but it's got its downtown area. It's peaceful, it's quaint, it's safe.
But all that changes on a cold November afternoon.
911, where is the emergency?
I can't even think of the address right now.
Okay, ma'am, listen to me. Take a deep breath. What's going on there?
She's not answering.
Can you tell me if she's breathing or not?
No, she's not. Harry, please. Please, Harry.
After receiving a call from the victim's parents, the Union police responded immediately to the home. The father was across the street with the mom, and they were clearly in shock.
The couple tells police they found their daughter, Diane Zaleski, unresponsive inside.
When I got there, there was massive amounts of blood in the foyer. The walls were covered with blood spray. There was just blood everywhere.
We followed the blood trail into the basement and discovered the victim's body.
She had clearly been dragged to the basement.
You could see her at the bottom of the stairs. She was literally in a pool of blood. There were stab wounds all over her torso, her face, her neck.
There were defensive wounds on her arms and hands. We knew there was a struggle. No doubt. I never saw so much trauma to one person's body.
She was partially clothed. There was a pair of black underwear, literally right next to her head.
Had the victim been sexually assaulted as well? Investigators find more disturbing clues.
There were 2 empty containers of solvent by the woman.
It appeared that the body had been cleaned.
So this was an effort to obscure evidence.
The killer also tried to erase their tracks throughout the house.
The kitchen sink was full of soapy water, and inside was the remote controls, some cleaning brushes, and lots of various items that it appeared the suspect had touched.
Also, the garbage can was gone, which led us to believe that the killer got rid of DNA or blood evidence or fingerprints. The entire bathroom area was soaking wet. The shower head was not in its cradle. We thought the killer took a shower, so we pulled the drain to check for DNA.
The crime scene was, how I would describe it, Herculean.
Detectives can't find a murder weapon, but forensics discover what could be a crucial piece of evidence the killer failed to clean up.
There was a droplet of blood on the floor.
It appeared to be foreign to us. It was cast off and inconsistent with the victim's blood.
He had cut himself somehow in the course of the struggle, whether it be from a knife, from punching her.
We knew that the guy was trying to cover himself, but it was minute, and they found it. They saw that blood.
We immediately swabbed that piece of evidence and transported it to our DNA lab.
Detectives get more information from Diane's parents.
They had gone to the house because she was supposed to take a sister-in-law to a doctor's appointment that morning, and nobody could get in touch with her.
They entered her home and they discovered Diane's body.
Her parents were really suffering.
Diane was a born and bred Jersey girl, gregarious and adored by her friends.
Diane, she brought joy to a lot of people's lives. Very positive, happy, laughing, and dancing. Even though she wasn't married and she didn't have children, she was very much focused on her family. Her parents were a little bit older, so she was kind of watching over them. And I knew her brother because he had lived with her for a while.
After 17 years of working as a legal secretary, Diane was now taking time for herself.
Here's this young single woman in her own house, and she's just retired. When she was offered a certain buyout package, there was no hesitation. She was ready. She had worked long and hard in her life. Diane was social. She had her friends from work, and often they'd go to happy hours. Then she had her dance friends. She would go on dates. She would just say, Joanne, in the end, I'm just looking for a guy who can carry in my packages. She still had hope that she was going to meet somebody to spend life with.
As investigators finish processing the crime scene, a theory evolves.
There were no forced entry marks that we could find in the house. He took the time trying to obscure everything. He tried to clean her body. All this took time.
In addition, there was a pot that appeared to have food in it. Maybe Diane had been cooking or had been eating when her killer entered her home, and there was a fork from that pot that we found in the kitchen sink full of cleaning fluid, which led us to believe the suspect had also taken time to eat.
I was involved with at least 150 homicides. I never saw anyone hang out in a house after a murder. I just never heard of it.
We felt it was someone Diane knew.
The killer was very comfortable in this house after the death of the victim.
Which led us down the boyfriend road, or someone who was dating her road.
But what was the killer's motive?
For any human being to do this to another human being is, I don't even have a word for it.
Police rule out robbery since nothing appears to be stolen, including Diane's wallet. And when investigators look through it, they find a clue.
We found a business card.
It belongs to someone named Mark. Who is this man? And could he know anything about Diane's brutal murder?
We found out from her family that he lived in the general area, and it was a bar just up the street from where Diane lived. And we found out that they had been there. So we think that's where she actually got his business card. And because she was out there, she was dating, we wanted to speak to everybody. Maybe he had some information. He came in, and I showed him a picture of her, and he flat out refused to say that he even knew her. He said he had no idea why the card was in her wallet. And then he said, she's not the target I would usually go for. Target?
Coming up, old boyfriends with disturbing pasts.
There was a restraining order in effect.
Play cat and mouse with police.
That wasn't his real name. This guy was ducking us.
When an unexpected tip sparks a race to find the killer.
Oh, he was just a monster.
There was now an absolute manhunt.
Police investigating the gruesome murder of Diane Zaleski found a single business card in the victim's wallet. It belongs to a man named Mark. Investigators want to know if he and Diane recently met, and when detectives question him, they become suspicious.
The words that came out of his mouth about targets were very strange. His mannerisms and just the things he said, they were wrong. I don't call girls that I'm going to go out with targets. He had done something, maybe, to other women. He wouldn't tell us anything.
Detectives found a drop of blood at the crime scene that they believe belongs to Diane's killer. Could it be linked to Mark?
He refused to give DNA. Just out and out refused.
It was something that was concerning to us. Someone who's innocent usually is cooperative.
He had taken a bottle of water from us, and when he was finished, he wouldn't throw it out. He left. And he carried his bottle of water with him. So he obviously knew something about DNA. So I followed him. He walked about 2 blocks away from the building, and he threw it.
Detectives collect the bottle and send it in for testing. As news of the murder spreads,
I couldn't believe it. I just was like, oh my God. Oh my God. It was like a bad dream. I just couldn't believe that it was her. It was just so devastating.
police fan across Diane's neighborhood, hoping someone saw something.
One older neighbor told us that earlier she had seen 2 children playing outside. And she knew one of the children lived in the neighborhood. She didn't know who the other child was. During the winter, she had seen him shoveling Diane's driveway.
Had the neighborhood kids witnessed anything out of the ordinary?
And so detectives wanted to identify those children. And when we spoke with the neighbor across the street from Diane, kind of diagonally, she said she had a daughter and a grandson. So those were the children identified as being outside.
All she could say is, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. Her 11-year-old grandson didn't indicate anything else, and boom, the door gets closed and we're done with our canvas there.
But detectives do get information that raises some troubling new questions.
The neighbors told us that her garbage can was outside in the street, which led us to believe that the killer got rid of the garbage. How would he know that if he put the garbage out, it would be gone in the morning?
And why was the killer so desperate to get rid of it?
Was there evidence or fingerprints? We didn't know.
We contacted the local garbage company, and we unfortunately discovered that it was already in the incinerator.
When detectives reviewed Diane's autopsy report, they learned she was killed sometime between 10 p.m. and 1 the next morning.
The medical examiner determined the cause and manner of death to be homicide and multiple blunt force injuries. The wounds were too numerous to count.
The person that had done this was obviously very violent. Some person who had snapped.
Because the body had been cleaned. The medical examiner could not determine if there was any signs of sexual assault.
What she had to live through, it's gruesome. It's frightening. I struggle with why. Why did that happen to her? I don't understand that it was just a heinous crime.
A week after Diane's death, investigators get the results from the blood they suspect came from the killer at the scene.
We were able to obtain a DNA profile, and it was male.
We did enter the profile through a DNA data bank, and that came up negative.
So we knew we had the killer, we just didn't know who it was.
Will Mark be a match? Police have to wait another week to find out.
And he was negative.
Because DNA is the only piece of evidence police have to tie the killer to the scene, detectives need to find the match.
It was our goal to locate and interview every male individual that she was friends or romantically involved with and obtain a DNA sample. We discovered that there was over 100 male contacts in Diane's phone.
One of the first contacts detectives talked to is someone named Mike Prunell.
We showed him a picture of Diane. He was like, Mark denied ever knowing her. And okay, take people at their word.
Without anything linking Mike to Diane, detectives don't see any reason to question him further and let him go.
We are interviewing basically anybody and everybody, and we were coming up with nothing. We interviewed girlfriends just to get a feel of Diane, how she was, if she had mentioned guys she might have been dating.
I met the prosecutor, and he wanted to know everything about Diane and what I knew about her. There was always drama with boyfriends. We thought for sure that it was one of those bad boyfriends.
A familiar name comes up, Mike Prunell. But he had told police he didn't know Diane, so detectives do more digging.
You know, checking driver's license histories and criminal histories, and you don't find Mike. We thought it was curious. We wanted to speak to him again, but he never returned a phone call. Every direction we followed, we ended up running into dead ends.
Why can't police find any records for Mike? And why did he lie about knowing Diane?
There was something out there that he was hiding.
When detectives ask Diane's brother Ron about Mike, what they hear completely surprises them.
Not only did he know her, but he asked Diane's father for her hand in marriage some 20 years prior. So he knew her real well. Another red flag.
Detectives investigating the murder of Diane Zaleski uncover shocking information about a prior person of interest. A man they interviewed, Mike Prunell, was adamant he didn't know the victim. But Diane's brother Ron tells police that's a lie.
We had found out Mike asked for her hand in marriage. He said Mike had an extensive history with her. He'd known her for at least 20 years. Prior to her move into the new house, she was renting an apartment from him for over a year. But he denied ever knowing her when I showed a picture of her to him.
Police discover more secrets and lies about Mike Prunell.
We found out that wasn't his real name. And when we did find out what it was, we ran his criminal history and we found out that he had domestic violence. And his wife at the time stated that he was beating her severely. He sat on her chest and was just pummeling her face to the point where her eye orbital was broken. So that sent flags off. We were totally convinced this was the guy, because he did beat his former wife. There was a restraining order in effect. And Diane was beaten so badly, this guy was pretty much ducking us. He wouldn't answer phone calls. It took us a little while to find him, but we did. Eventually, got him in again a second time.
But again, Mike won't admit he knows Diane.
He was being less than truthful. It's like, okay, you deny knowing her, you asked her to marry you. It's very suspicious.
He was lying, obviously. We never discovered the reason for that.
Getting nowhere, police take another approach.
We asked where he was, the time of the murder, and he couldn't give us an alibi. And we spoke to him in depth. He didn't give us any answers, nothing concrete.
Detectives can't hold him, but they don't want to let him go before getting one thing.
Eventually, he did consent to DNA. Our hopes are all raised.
We immediately transported it to our lab. We would get the result within 48 hours.
While they wait, Mike is released for the second time, and detectives work to place their suspect at the scene.
We found out that his brother ran a business close to Diane's house. Hopefully there was video evidence there for people that were coming and going. Somebody who worked there might have seen him. We interviewed everybody, but it didn't really drum up anything tangible. And there was absolutely no video surveillance at all. Nothing.
Detectives' next hope lies with the DNA results.
And it was negative. It wasn't a match.
We were feeling frustrated because we knew the killer was still out there. We had his profile. To say this wasn't a mountainous investigation is an understatement. We had to track down and obtain biological samples from close to 100 individuals.
We took swabs from her family members so that we could exclude them at some point as being the source of the DNA.
While searching through Diane's computer, forensic analysts discover new information.
We took her computer. There were several different things that we found.
Everything is timestamped. Hours after Diane's death, there was activity on the PC.
Numerous items, technology items, were attempted to be purchased using Diane's credit card. It was someone that was comfortable having things delivered to Diane's house and it not being out of the ordinary if they were the ones collecting them.
We knew he tried to purchase an Apple computer, an iPhone, and it didn't go through. We had no idea why the purchase itself didn't go through.
We also found that the killer, while in the home, was also searching pornographic websites.
I mean, to go on pornographic websites after you just brutally killed a woman.
Waiting for justice takes a toll on Diane's friends.
Who could it be? Why is this so complicated? We watch the news all the time and we see these things, we see murders, but when it happens to somebody you know, it's devastating. It's sad. It made me very sad about humanity. That someone is so capable of doing something so brutal to someone that is so beautiful. Everyone that loved her wanted closure on this.
3 weeks after Diane's murder, detectives get results back from the crime lab that send the investigation in an unexpected direction.
We tested the black underwear found next to the decedent's head. DNA profile was collected. That DNA came back to her brother.
After 54-year-old Diane Zaleski is savagely murdered, detectives discover DNA from the crime scene belongs to someone close to home.
The DNA that was in the pair of underwear lying next to Diane came back to Ron, her brother. A lot of things ran through all of our minds.
We just couldn't believe it.
We thought that there might have been something sexual with her brother, and she had enough. And he killed her. Brutally killed his sister. Diane's brother worked for the Department of Public Works. So he would know when garbage was collected on her street.
The killer knew I can stay until the garbage is removed and then I'm safe to leave.
So there's a possibility that Diane's brother could have done it, collected all the evidence, and taken out the garbage. The killer was there for a long time. Diane's brother, he knew her pattern, her daily pattern. He would be comfortable staying on the scene, making themselves something to eat. I called him up that night and said, "Hey, do you got 10 minutes to come down and talk to me?"
Ron agrees to come in the next day.
How do you say this without accusing the brother of basically having sex with his sister? Because that's what it leads you to believe. I have this report saying that Ron's semen was found in the underwear, so I just put the report on the desk and I slid it over to him and I said, "What do you think?" It's like he was hit by a freight train. The jaw drops. He said, I can't explain it. It can't be true. He went on about the wash and the laundry, that up until just prior to her death, she was doing laundry at her brother's house. I sort of left it at that. I said, we can keep this between us for now. I'll talk to you again in a couple days.
In the interim, Detectives send Ron's DNA to compare with the blood spot found at the scene. They also get some crucial details from Ron's wife.
The wife said he was home with me, he couldn't have done this, he didn't do this. We asked specific pointed questions. She told us they weren't Diane's underwear, they were Ron's wife's underwear. They had the same size and brand of underwear. She did tell us that Diane had been doing laundry in their house. We also found out sperm can be resilient into the wash. So the sperm that was in the underwear could actually be from Diane's brother, and her sister-in-law and her underwear got mixed up. The whole family got by his side. After conducting all the interviews, we all came to the conclusion that he didn't do a thing.
There's hard proof of Ron's innocence when investigators find out his DNA isn't a match for the blood found at the scene.
Case took lots of twists and turns, and there were parts that were shocking to us where we had to kind of sit down and regroup. Diane was also on some dating websites, so we also had to attack that aspect of the case.
Could she have met someone sinister over the internet?
Online dating can be frightening. There are people who are really troubled, and if they come across your path, you are the victim.
Detectives focus on someone who called and texted Diane a lot.
Kyle came to our attention because he was in her phone. And Kyle was very evasive. Didn't want to come in for an interview. He was just a friend. He wasn't romantic with her at all. At least that's what he said.
But was that true? Or did Kyle want more than Diane's friendship?
Her circle of friends said he was a possible person of interest. And we acted on it. We followed up on it. He was not cooperative. We obtained subpoenas to go find them and bring him in for statements.
When he finally did come in for an interview and refused to give a DNA sample, I think it was too intrusive to him. And he asked a lot of questions. Normally, I'm the guy asking all the questions. So it gets your radar up a little bit that something's not exactly right with this guy. He actually said that he was at the house the week prior to her death, so he was familiar with the house, wanted a relationship with the victim. He denied that. We didn't believe that was true at all. People that I'd spoken to didn't think that he was her type. Maybe she laughed at him and told him to get out. Why else would he be evasive if he wasn't hiding something?
There were no signs of forced entry at all to the home. So Diane must have let this person into her home.
Was that person Kyle?
Maybe he didn't go there with the intent to kill, but maybe something flipped the switch.
Detectives want to know where Kyle was the night of the murder.
He said he works nights. And all the access in the building was key card controlled.
Detectives check logs. There is a record of Kyle swiping in.
But who's to say that somebody else wasn't using his key card? Until we got DNA, we'll just never know.
Investigators tell Kyle if he wants to be ruled out, he needs to cooperate.
We did eventually collect his DNA. He was negative. DNA set him free.
As weeks turn into months, investigators are far from uncovering the identity of Diane's killer.
We're hitting the year anniversary of Diane's death. It was very hard to explain to the family that we were no closer. You saw a family not being able to fully grieve because they didn't know who did this.
It was like a bad dream. I was worried. I said that they should have found someone by this time.
We knew the killer was out there. We were feeling frustrated. He would never be identified. That was our worst fear.
It's been a year since Diane Zaleski was found stabbed to death in her home, and police are no closer to solving her murder. To find her killer, detectives come up with a new strategy.
You usually try to piece together the victim's life, but we felt we needed to come at this from another angle and try to figure out who our suspect was.
Detective Henderson met with the FBI profile unit to identify what type of behavior a person may have done this to Diane.
We talked to psychologists, psychiatrists, and we hashed everything out. Where we went, why we went there, what did this lead, is there anything still open? We went through all the DNA, we went through all the interviews, we went through the whole case. You know, the person trying to buy stuff online, the pornography that was visited, everything. We laid out the whole case.
The profile came back to a loner, a petty thief, possibly, someone with psychological issues. Someone that was in her life, but not for a long time.
Age would have been younger. It would have been somebody that was into technology.
We realized that the individuals that we were speaking to did not fit that profile.
To catch the killer, investigators generate new leads.
One of the things was on the year anniversary, do a media blitz. Local TV, local newspapers.
We just wanted to see whether or not it might stir the pot.
Detectives decide to release new information to the public.
So the things that we included in the press release, whoever killed Diane cleaned up after himself. We also said that we now have the killer's DNA on file. And then we recanvassed everywhere.
After a month, detectives have received a flurry of new tips. And one really grabs their attention.
Detective Rob Henderson received a phone call from an individual out of state indicating that she was on social media with an individual who was concerned about his well-being and his safety because he thought he was being investigated by police because of a serious crime he committed in New Jersey.
She tells me, I'm a stay-at-home mom. You may think I'm a little crazy, but I'm Facebook friends with this guy.
This woman was on Facebook and had met a person years earlier in a Facebook chat room and then eventually formed a friendship with this person. She explained to us that she had had conversations with him that were troubling to her.
She had said that he had told her that he had committed a murder.
This witness was very concerned for her family, but she said, if he had anything to do with this, I need to speak the truth.
We had been friends for about 3 or 4 years at that time. We used to chat through Instant Messenger all the time. He had a lot of different screen names. He called me his big little sister. He was 9 years younger than me. He told me he lived in New Jersey. He was fluctuating in and out of homelessness. He told me that he sold drugs and things like that, but I didn't feel like that was who he was. I think he was just doing it because he felt like he had to. Out of the blue, he's like, I did the worst thing you can think of. And I'm kind of sitting there thinking, like, what is he talking about? I don't know, a drug dealer getting killed. And I was like, what did you do? He said, they found DNA. And so I'm like, what do you mean they found DNA? While I was talking to him, I Googled some articles just to see if anything matched up with the story that he told me. And so I went online and I looked up murder, New Jersey DNA. And instantly an article came up.
She searched and she found the 1-year anniversary article. we put together to try to rekindle some interest in Diane's story.
I was shocked of what I did find. The article says that he tried to purchase an iPad with using her credit cards. The information that they put in the article matched what I knew about my friend. And a light bulb just went off in my head. I know that's him. It had to have been him.
She told us that he had been washing clothing at the home and that how he had literally been in his boxers cleaning.
She told me that he told her that he made himself dinner. Now, we did release certain things in the article about there was some food, but we didn't say he made himself a meal. We didn't provide that information, but he did.
We ended that phone call, and then within a matter of hours, we're booking a flight to visit her and to take some evidence from her. Upon meeting with her and looking at her computer and doing a forensic examination, we knew we had the right guy.
Detectives asked the woman for his name.
Nashon. That's what he called himself, because he didn't like his first name, Darnell.
She was a little nervous and a little hesitant, but eventually she gave us his full name.
Arnell Yearwood.
The last name gets detectives' attention.
We knew from our canvas that individuals with that same last name lived diagonally across the street from Diane.
When we look back at all the documented reports, it was determined that we had spoke to the killer's mother.
After over a year and a half investigating the grisly murder of Diane Zaleski, police finally get the break they need. They have the name of the suspected killer, Arnell Yearwood. And in a shocking twist, detectives discover his family actually lives on Diane's street, and they've been to the house.
We were there last year after one older neighbor told us that she had seen two kids playing outside. And she knew one of the children lived in the neighborhood. She didn't know who the other child was.
We did some more digging and some more investigation on Yearwood. Arnell Yearwood, although he was in his 20s, he was very small in stature. So he could be mistaken in a puffy jacket for a kid. We knew that Diane had some kids on the block helping shovel snow or do some yard work. It really led us to believe who was described as this kid was the killer. We went back across the street, made it look like we were canvassing other homes, but really we only had one home that we wanted information from, and that was his mother, Mrs. Yearwood. So we went to her home, said, "We know you have a son," and asked specific information about that son. And her daughter, who lived in the home, the mother of that child that was seen on the block, expressed to us that her brother, Arnell, had been at times living in the basement, and it would have been during the time frame of Diane's murder. That her brother sometimes would be outside with her own son.
Arnell's mother insists she has no idea where her 26-year-old son is.
We have to find this guy because we have to do a DNA match.
There was now an absolute manhunt.
A track and trace on Arnell's phone narrows down his position.
Somebody's got eyeballs on the house, and next thing you know, a kid starts walking down the street. Sure enough, it was Arnell Yearwood. And he was 5'1", 120 pounds, soaking wet, wearing winter clothes. Looked like a kid.
No one expected this.
We scooped him up, and we took him back to the office. He was nonchalant. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think I was there then.
Detectives push harder, knowing they need to get a DNA sample from Arnell to compare to the crime scene.
He did consent, but after we took his DNA, then he stopped talking. My boss called me at 7 o'clock that night and said, it's him.
On April 7th, 2012, police arrest Arnell Yearwood for the murder of Diane Zaleski.
He was charged and brought back to the homicide task force and questioned again.
This time, Arnell starts talking, and investigators can now piece together what happened the night of Diane's murder.
She let him in based on the fact that he was a neighbor.
He did small chores for Diane. The garbage, minor painting, cleaning around the house. He entered the house to collect money.
Diane looked at him as the nice neighbor kid that she was trying to help. He knocked on her door that night and she let him in because she thought he was harmless. He wanted a romantic relationship and things went bad, and he did not take kindly to being rejected.
She told him to get out, and that's when he said he took a pair of scissors and he started stabbing her. In the entrance right at the front door, that's where the first attack occurred. After he had her down on the ground, he was strangling her. He dragged her down the stairs and left her body dead at the bottom of the stairs. And then he went about his cleanup, and cleanup of him, cleanup of her, and his pornography watching. And at some point, he made himself something to eat.
But why would this kid brutally murder this vivacious woman?
The killer never talked about a motive, ever. And to prove a murder, you don't have to prove motive. We never identified what a motive was.
Whatever it was that caused him to act the way he did, so viciously, it will never be explained.
In court, Arnell Yearwood pleads guilty to the murder of Diane Zaleski. He is sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Oh, he was just a monster. I was disappointed, but I guess that's the maximum you can get. At least there was some accountability, because she deserved that. Her family deserved that.
The family made up black bracelets with white lettering that said "Justice for Diane, November 18th, 2010, which was the date she was murdered. And I wore that bracelet up until the day he pled guilty in court and went to jail. 2.5 years I wore that, and I didn't take it off.
Losing Diane is like a moment in life, like before Diane and after Diane. It's been quite a few years since she's gone, but I do still miss her. Her heart is still with me. She was so real and very kind, and she was funny. And every once in a while, I could feel her. I could feel her presence. And I think I look forward to seeing her someday again.
A beloved mother and friend.
Sarah was the sweetest person on this earth.
She wanted to do anything for you to make you happy.
Murdered in her home.
Just the sheer brutality. Somebody was out of control.
It was so terrifying. It was so frightening.
Sends police on the hunt for a killer.
Possible suspect right away is her husband.
And they find out, there's someone else involved with this person.
You were just sitting there wondering, are they ever going to find who did this?
But the search for the truth.
This is strange. There are so many twists and turns. What really happened?
Uncovers a culprit.
Something's going on here. They were never even on the suspect radar.
That surprises everyone.
Wow, that was a twist none of us expected.
It was shocking.
No, this isn't right.
I never expected that someone like that could be evil.
Howard County, Maryland, an affluent community nestled between Baltimore and Washington, D.C.
Howard County itself is a very quiet, peaceful suburb.
Howard County is very much a bedroom community. People move here for the schools. That's what it's known for. There's very, very little crime.
But on Sunday, November 15th, 1998, at 7:44 p.m., a concerned resident makes a call to police.
I have a friend who I normally hear from every day, and I haven't heard from her all day, and there's a really funny message on my machine from last night. And I wondered if someone could drive by her house and check it out.
What's the lady's name?
Sarah Roris.
I did not hear from Sarah all day. That is not normal. Something's wrong.
Laura tells police that the 35-year-old single mother lives with her 1-year-old son, but the boy is with his father this weekend. Patrol officers head to the Roris home in the township of Elkridge to investigate.
The police were able to gain access to the house, and upon entering the house, they conducted a sweep, and in the back family room, they found the body of Sarah Roris. It appeared that she'd been stabbed to death.
Even hardened homicide investigators are taken aback when they see Sarah's mutilated body.
The thing that still sticks in my mind is just the sheer brutality. I can close my eyes and see it as vividly today as I did then. The ones most visible were wounds to Sarah's neck and throat, multiple deep cuts and slashes. She was basically just short of being decapitated. She had severe cuts to each wrist. Her hands were just short of being cut completely off. There was a series of stab wounds to her stomach. Tremendous amount of blood on the floor around her. Blood spattered up and down the walls. There was blood splattered all over the child's toys. It was complete and utter overkill. Somebody was out of control.
Could the vicious nature of the attack mean this was a crime of passion? Detectives hunt for clues to help piece together this gruesome event.
It was apparent that she had been dead for a period of time before we discovered her. The blood had pretty much dried. I was estimating she probably had been dead for about 24 hours. There had been forced entry to the house. Bloody boot prints leading from the body indicate that the suspect both entered and exited through the window. There appeared to be some degree of ransacking. VCR appeared to be missing. The phone was missing from the wall. A couple drawers in the kitchen had been rifled through, but at the same time, the victim's laptop, computer, purse, and items were relatively untouched on the kitchen table. An initial thought on our part was, could it all be staging in an attempt to throw us off, to make us think it was a robbery or burglary gone bad?
Looking for witnesses, police fan out to speak with Sarah's neighbors on her quiet suburban street.
As brutal and as violent as this attack was, nobody heard anything. Not a sound.
Inside the house, the forensic team spends hours gathering evidence.
On the wall above Sarah's body, crime scene technicians were able to recover a couple bloody fingerprints. It indicated that the person was wearing gloves.
Investigators must now solve the mystery of why Sarah Roris would fall prey to such a brutal attack. Detectives start by speaking with Sarah's friend, Laura Billiter, who first called police. They have to reveal the heartbreaking news that her friend is dead.
I didn't want it to be true. I was in denial, and you just can't process information for a while. You're frozen. I kept trying to deny that it was Sarah. No one deserves to die like that.
Sarah Williamson was born on a Florida military base in 1963, the daughter of an Air Force sergeant. Growing up, she was gregarious with a knack for mathematics.
Sarah was not your typical introverted mathematician. She was very sociable.
To describe Sarah, she gave love freely She wanted to do anything for you to make you happy.
After graduating college, Sarah moved to Maryland, where she took a job as a statistician at the National Security Agency.
Sarah and I met at work, and she was the best friend you could ever have. Sarah was the sweetest person on this earth. She had friends everywhere at work. She had built up a reputation for herself. She was well respected. And she always was going to school or improving herself in some way.
In 1991, while earning a master's degree, Sarah met Lorenzo Raris, and they began a relationship. The two married in 1994.
Sarah wanted the husband, the children, the house in the country, the white picket fence. She wanted that golden dream.
After 3 years of marriage, Sarah and Lorenzo had a son, Will.
She was a great mom. She doted on Will.
But the new baby put a strain on the marriage.
Her family was down in Alabama, so she was missing that support system. Lorenzo did very little to help her.
Over the next year, friends saw their relationship deteriorate.
Things really took a downturn. The marriage was breaking down. Sarah, during all that, was a complete mess.
In 1998, Sarah and Lorenzo separated. Eager for a fresh start, Sarah filed for divorce.
She was just becoming a strong woman again, proud of the fact that she was able to live on her own and take care of her child on her own. It was wonderful to see.
Now, 5 months later, Sarah's been found butchered in her own living room. The beloved mother's lifeless body left laying in a pool of blood.
She had become such a strong, independent woman, and I was so proud of her. I was devastated.
Laura gives detectives the phone message from her answering machine that prompted Laura to call police in the first place.
I couldn't understand any of it because it was so garbled. The only thing I knew, somebody was in trouble. I did a redial, and I figured out it was from Sarah.
In listening to the recording, you can hear sounds of a struggle, followed by a series of short, sharp screams. It was 30, 40 seconds, basically, of Sarah being murdered. I believe that she was probably in the process of maybe trying to call 911 when she inadvertently hit the preset speed dial for Laura.
The timestamp on the message is 8:46 p.m. on Saturday night, only 36 hours earlier.
The recording gave us a starting point that we know on this date and this time, Sarah Raris was attacked and murdered.
I could hear her last moments. I was shocked. I was horrified. And then I got angry, and I'm like, you gotta go pick up Lorenzo. He's involved in this.
Laura was aware Sarah was involved in a very bitter and heated custody dispute with her estranged husband. She had real fear that it was not going to end well. So I wanted to talk to the husband.
This is not going to be a random act of violence. This is going to be murder.
Coming up, a hunt for the truth.
Something's going on here. We had to look into the possibility of an affair.
Reveals buried secrets.
We opened the door and he threw up all over the parking lot. He knows something.
And a stunning turn in the case.
I was absolutely shocked. It's like out of a movie.
It was such an unexpected twist.
Hours after discovering the body of 35-year-old Sarah Raris, detectives investigating the murder have a lead. Sarah's friend Laura tells police she suspects Sarah's estranged husband, Lorenzo Raris, might have had something to do with her murder.
We found out that Sarah was involved in an extremely contentious custody divorce situation internal police records that indicated the police had responded there at least once before for disturbance between Sarah and her estranged husband.
After Will was born, the marriage really started breaking down. Lorenzo was very jealous of his child because his child was taking away the attention that he had received from Sarah. Sarah told me that he was not happy with that.
Sarah turned to Lorenzo's mother, Amelia, who lived nearby, for help.
Sarah wanted Amelia involved. She was hoping that Amelia would be a calming influence on Lorenzo. And it would also allow, Sarah to spend a little bit more time with Lorenzo.
Instead of getting better, things got worse.
Sarah confided in me his mother was a little too involved doing all of the caregiving, and Lorenzo wanted nothing to do with the day-to-day tasks that it takes to raise a child. Sarah was very adamant that Lorenzo is his father. He needs to be very involved in taking care of their son.
One morning, I got a phone call. Sarah was hysterical. She and Lorenzo got into an argument. He tried to hit her while she was holding Will, so she had to turn with the baby in her arms, and he had kicked her. She was just distraught. And I come pick her up, and we head straight to the courtroom. We put a restraining order in, and Lorenzo is not allowed back into the house. Lorenzo was extremely mad. Sarah was scared for her life. She was deathly afraid that she was going to be murdered.
Lorenzo Raris is approached by the Howard County Police for questioning.
When Lorenzo was first notified that his wife had been murdered, he covered his face with his hands. He fell to his knees. And in the initial officer's minds, he pretended to be crying and weeping into his hands, and that when he stood up, there was no evidence at all that he had been crying. One of the first things I noticed in dealing with Lorenzo was his lack of reaction, his lack of emotion, his lack of caring was significant. I thought he was smug, I thought he was arrogant. I just sensed he wasn't all that upset by what had happened to Sarah.
Detectives start by asking the 33-year-old sales manager if he had any involvement in Sarah's murder.
He denied it, that he'd had anything to do with it. At the same time, I just felt that there was something off. It was just an instinct on my part, but I couldn't put my finger on it.
Lorenzo offers up his own theory as to who killed Sarah.
He alluded to the fact that Sarah may have been involved or been having an affair with a previous co-worker, but he said that if anything had happened, it would have probably been a result of this affair.
Lorenzo claims the last time he saw Sarah was on Friday morning when he picked up their son for the weekend.
The alibi that he provided for the Saturday night and weekend in question was that he was at home at the family house with the baby. His brother and his parents, who also lived in the house, were there.
Detectives collect evidence from Lorenzo to search against anything found at the crime scene.
We had a search warrant for his person, which allowed us to collect samples of DNA, hair, photographs, and fingerprints.
With nothing concrete to tie Lorenzo to the murder, detectives have to let him go.
Even though everything was pointing towards Lorenzo, he still has an alibi when he's saying he's at home and he's got all these family witnesses. If in fact he did it, we need to start punching holes in the family alibi.
Investigators head to the Raris family home, 30 minutes away in Parkville.
His car was seized, and other detectives then launched into the search of the Raris family home. We conducted interviews with all the family members, including Lorenzo's mother, Amelia. When asked where she was on that Saturday night, she said that she was working. She was a nurse's aide at a local nursing home, so she was at work during the time frame of the homicide.
Amelia tells detectives that another member of the Raris family was at home that night.
Lorenzo's brother, Mike, lived with the Raris family in Parkville. They all lived in the same house. Mike is the younger brother of Lorenzo, but as far as their personalities, there was a a distinct difference between the two. He didn't have the same degree of arrogance or smugness about him that Lorenzo had. He appeared to be somewhat timid.
Mike tells police that Lorenzo was at home when he woke up to go work his night shift job.
It's the family saying he was there. A family alibi, in my opinion, has never been rock solid. It has to be investigated.
But a search of the Raris home fails to yield any new clues.
Nothing of evidentiary value came from the Raris house. Nothing of evidentiary value came from his truck. The only thing we walked away with is we had his initial denials and his initial alibi. From that point on, he lawyered up.
As detectives consider their next move, the public concern about the murder of Sarah Raris grows.
This murder sent shockwaves through the Howard County community. It caused major headlines.
There are a lot of Sarahs in this community, so to have a smart, competent, career-driven woman murdered in this way in her house, it was shocking.
With nothing tying Lorenzo to the murder, investigators turn their attention to his allegation that Sarah was having an affair. Could that have led to her death?
We had to look into the possibility of an affair. The former boss that Lorenzo claimed she was having an affair with had to be tracked down and interviewed. The relationship between the two of them, we had to look at it. We had to investigate.
Police investigating the savage murder of Sarah Raris are looking into her estranged husband's claim that Sarah had been having an affair with her former boss.
Lorenzo had implied that Sarah was having an affair with a former co-worker or supervisor, a gentleman by the name of Don Lewis. He had since retired from NSA and was living in Massachusetts.
Detectives travel to Cape Cod to interview Don Lewis. The 51-year-old tells detectives that he is not surprised by Lorenzo's claim of an affair.
Mr. Lewis told us that Lorenzo had emailed accusing him of having an affair with Sarah. He denied it. He said he was a father figure or mentor to Sarah. There was no romantic overtones, and that there was no reason for him to kill her, nor did he want anything bad to happen to her.
Don tells detectives he had been shocked to hear news of Sarah's death, and he was at a friend's dinner party hundreds of miles away when it happened.
Mr. Lewis had an alibi for the Saturday night. He was in Massachusetts the night of the murder, and they had a solid alibi.
Detectives reach out to those close to Sarah to learn more about her relationship with her former boss.
Don Lewis was a friend of hers. They did have a mentor-mentee relationship, but that was all there was to Don Lewis.
It was more like a father-daughter type of relationship. There was never a romance.
The investigation revealed that the affair aspect of it appeared to be pure fabrication on the part of Lorenzo. There was just nothing there.
A week following her death, those closest to Sarah gather to honor her memory.
The church memorial was packed. There was so much love in that room. Everybody showed up. All of her coworkers and friends from work showed up. The police showed up. Lorenzo didn't show up, nor did any of the rest of the family.
I actually covered her memorial service. Her friends were not shy about casting aspersions on Lorenzo Raris, her husband. That's their suspect number one, their prime suspect.
After Sarah's funeral, investigators speak with the medical examiner about what was found during the autopsy.
The cause of death was no surprise. It was massive blood loss due to the lacerations to her throat. She bled out over 80% of her blood volume. Even the pathologist characterized it as complete overkill.
A forensics report reveals no useful fingerprints from the crime scene. but investigators still hold hope for tests on the bloody glove prints found on the wall behind the body.
The blood was sent out for DNA analysis. That takes a little bit of time to obtain.
While they await test results, detectives revisit their strongest lead, the phone message that captured the final moments of Sarah's life.
Other detectives are listening to the tape, and they thought that at some point in the struggle they heard Sarah utter the name Mike.
Could Sarah be calling out the name of her killer?
Somebody says, "Oh, right there, it sounds like Mike." I hear Mike. Lorenzo's brother's name is Mike or Michael.
But what possible motive could Mike Rauris have to kill his sister-in-law?
One of the theories that we were kicking around at this point was, could it have been a family member? Because initially all suspicion would have fallen on Lorenzo. And to keep Lorenzo out of it and to maintain the child custody, to have a family member do it, the most logical one would have been Mike. He had to be looked at as a potential suspect.
Detectives sit down with Lorenzo's little brother and play him the answering machine message.
The recording was played for him, and Mike was asked, "Do you hear the name Mike?" And he said no, he did not. Mike denied being personally involved in the murder of Sarah. My overall impressions of Mike was, I don't think he had it in him to do something like this, but I had a feeling that there was something playing on him. Again, he was part of Lorenzo's alibi that he was at home at the time of the murder.
Mike sticks to the story he'd previously told police, that when he woke up Saturday evening to go to work, Lorenzo was at home.
Blood was drawn, hairs were pulled. We fingerprinted him, we photographed him. We drove him back to his job. I told him, I said, "I think you know what happened. I think you know what is going on." And we opened the door, and he threw up all over the parking lot. And I said, "Whenever you want to come clean on this, you know who to call," and I gave him my card. My partner and I, we both felt he knows something.
Detectives investigating the murder of Sarah Rauris suspect that her brother-in-law, Mike Rauris, might know more about her murder than he is letting on.
My feeling was something's going on here. Maybe if he didn't do it, he definitely knows about it.
Mike's brother and Sarah's estranged husband, Lorenzo Rauris, is still a suspect in Sarah's murder. But both men say they were at home together at the time she was killed.
If there was one avenue to break the Rauris family alibi, I just thought the weak link was going to be Mike. Problem was, the lawyer that was representing Lorenzo got involved, and from that point on, we were not allowed to speak with Mike without counsel being present. That threw up a huge wall.
A month following the murder, the police investigation is at a standstill. But there is one person that investigators think might be able to help.
Lorenzo had been married previously. His first wife, Becky, was still living locally. We thought she's somebody that we could enlist.
Detectives meet with Becky Rauris to ask for her assistance in the investigation.
Once she heard that Sarah had been murdered, Becky actually agreed to help us. She still had some degree of relationship with Lorenzo. They were cordial to each other. Becky agreed to allow us to record her phone calls with Lorenzo. We were hoping to obtain statements from Lorenzo that would incriminate him in the murder.
Becky reaches out to her ex-husband and tries to steer their conversation to Sarah's murder.
She was phenomenal. She conducted a number of controlled calls on our behalf with him. We were hopefully optimistic that we would get something, but he never said anything incriminating to her on those recordings.
Detectives have hit a dead end in their pursuit of Sarah's killer.
I remember cornering the police chief out of like a public event to ask him, hey, any updates on the case? And he obviously said no. There were no updates to give. They had nothing.
I prayed every day that this would be the day that something, would come forth.
Investigators get new hope when DNA analysis of blood from the glove prints at the crime scene comes back.
The blood came back as a mixture of Sarah's DNA and an unknown male. We were confident that we had the killer's DNA because it's mixed with Sarah's blood. If we found that person, then we could definitely put them at the scene with her actually bleeding.
Could this finally be what detectives need to tie Lorenzo to his wife's murder?
We submitted DNA samples from Lorenzo and his brother Mike for DNA comparison. Came back that neither one were a match. Obviously, that was a bit of a blow. It's very disappointing. Even though everything was pointing towards Lorenzo, it's not him.
In the beginning, it was pretty clear the police thought that her husband played a role in this. She had a very messy divorce going on. There were custody disputes, but the police didn't arrest him. And so there was a real air of mystery about it because the police couldn't figure it out either.
If Lorenzo was not responsible for the murder of Sarah, who could her killer be? And why was the beloved mother killed in such a violent manner? Investigators are back to square one.
Something has got to give on this. You go back through it again. Did I miss something? You have to look at everything. I did contact the FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit in Quantico, and they run it against all other cases in the country looking for similarities. Nothing of value came from that.
Detectives also seek help with deciphering the answering machine message from Laura that captured Sarah's attack.
We sent the recording to the FBI to see if they could clean it up and enhance it to try to determine if in fact it was a name. Well, it turned out it's not Mike. The whole thing with hearing the name Mike, I think, in hindsight, was just pure power of suggestion.
When you have a murder of this sort and no arrest, there was a concern and tension in the community as to what kind of person would do something like this.
We had been hammering away on this thing for almost 7-8 months. At that point, we're kind of like dead in the water. We felt there was nothing else we could do to advance the case.
You were just sitting there wondering, are they ever going to find who did this? You started to lose hope.
Just as the case goes cold, an urgent call comes in from a neighboring jurisdiction.
My partner came running down the hall and says, you need to come down and take this call. I have Baltimore County Homicide on the phone. You need to hear this. We got it. We got this case.
The 7-month hunt for the killer of Sarah Raris is at a standstill when detectives investigating the murder receive an unexpected phone call.
Picked up the phone and it was Detective Phil Morrill from Baltimore County. He says, hey, I just got done running a wired conversation with an inmate in the Baltimore County Detention Center, talking about how he committed this murder of a woman. He described how he went through the window and how he attacked her and how he stabbed her in the belly. And he said, I damn near took her head off. And he says, do you guys have anything like it? And I said, oh yeah, we do. The murder of Sarah Raris. And he said, well, you need to hear this tape.
Howard County investigators get a copy of the jailhouse recording of Ardale Tickles, who had been locked up for an armed robbery 3 months ago.
We sat down and we started listening to the tape of Ardale Tickles. Tickles is describing this homicide that he had committed.
Yeah, the one that I killed. So I dropped through the window. He was like, no, don't kill me, please don't. And I started driving out of the belly. And blood was just gushing out. On the wrist, there was no clout. I took the knife, and I just took the head off.
Tickles is describing things that only the police and the suspect would know, all the injuries that had been inflicted upon Sarah. None of that had been released. None of that had been made public. I knew now we had it. I mean, I'm confident Ardell Tickles committed this murder.
Tickles keeps talking and has an even bigger revelation.
He's talking about how he came to be employed to do this.
I got paid, you know what I'm saying, to let me while I was working out, he told me to go hit this lady on the phone. He just gave me the head to do it, and I went to go do it.
It's now a straight-up murder for hire. We had the actual physical killer of Sarah Raris. We needed the person who hired him and paid him to conduct the murder, a co-worker. We had some homework to do.
Who was this mysterious co-worker? What was her relation to Sarah? And why would she want Sarah killed? Investigators start with Ardell Tickles.
He's 19 years old. He's a kid at this point. He was incarcerated awaiting trial. He robbed the McDonald's and he shot the manager during the course of the robbery. When we started digging into him, we couldn't find any kind of criminal record with him prior to this.
Detectives checked Tickles' employment history, looking for any intersection with Sarah's life or those that knew her.
We went back like a year. He was employed in the laundry room at a local nursing home in Baltimore. He did the laundry for this facility.
The entire investigation turns when detectives realize who also worked at the same nursing home.
Lorenzo's mother, Amelia, they were co-workers. That was kind of mind-blowing, you know. She was never even on the suspect radar. Him and Amelia working at the same nursing home, it was the one piece to the puzzle that you needed to put in, and the rest of them just kind of fell into place after that.
Could it really be true that this 63-year-old grandmother hired someone to kill her daughter-in-law? And if it is true, who else knew about it?
We still weren't convinced that Lorenzo was completely blameless in this. So there was still a lot of investigative work to do. The Raris house in Parkville was put under surveillance while we investigated the relationship between Tickles and Amelia. We matched up work schedules, so we were able to establish, yes, they worked together, yes, they worked the same hours. We were able to locate a few co-workers who remember seeing Amelia talking to this guy. We were able to show that relationship did in fact exist.
But even with a known relationship, police had no evidence Amelia plotted to murder Sarah. To get to the truth, investigators turned to the man they believe killed Sarah.
Tickles was brought in to try to elicit his cooperation. What he gives up, we can use.
Detectives play Tickles the jailhouse recording.
I had the tape recording set to a point where he admits to stabbing her. He heard his voice talk about the murder.
As you can see, we don't need your confession. No, we got it.
Can you please enlighten me on what I'm facing and what I'm dealing with in this case?
You're going to be charged with 1 count of first-degree murder. But we need to get some details worked out. The person we want is this woman that hired you.
I had a picture of Amelia. I said, "Is this the woman?" And he says, "Yeah, that's her." We got her. I mean, it was huge. In some respects, it validated what we thought all along, that everything originated in the Raris household, in the Raris family. Never in 100 years would we have thought that she's the one that was calling the shots.
What did she say to you?
For a minute, she couldn't go on with life until this lady was dead. She was like, "Do me a favor and kill this lady," basically.
So she used the word kill?
Kill, take him off the earth, yeah. And she said, "I'll pay you." She said, "I'll give you money."
If you hire somebody to commit a murder and that person carries it out, then you're susceptible to the same charges and the same penalties as the person who did the actual killing. So now we're looking at first-degree murder charges for Amelia.
After it was over with, Did you call this woman that night?
No, I met her at work, like that week.
Okay. Is that when she paid you?
Yeah, she had a bundle of like $3,000.
Despite Tickle's revelations, investigators know it will be hard to bring charges against Amelia on the word of a jailed offender.
We had enough. We could have easily arrested Tickles and called it case closed. We needed something that really implicated Amelia in the conspiracy. What we wanted him to do to nail down the first-degree murder charge was get on the phone and call Amelia. We wanted to run a controlled call with him, and he refused. When that didn't happen, we had some work to do.
Investigators now suspect Sarah Raris was murdered in a hit organized by her mother-in-law, Amelia Raris. But the hitman, Ardale Tickles, refuses to take part in a wiretap to implicate her.
I would have loved to have got this controlled phone call to Amelia to further establish Amelia's involvement in the planning of the murder, but we still felt we were on the right track. A big item of evidence in this case obviously would be follow the money. We pulled Amelia's financial records and found out, sure enough, Amelia wrote a check out in the amount that Tickles says he got paid, and she wrote it out to cash. That was key. That's the money trail.
Amelia Raris is arrested and interviewed by detectives.
She acknowledged her relationship with Tickles, and she also acknowledged that she hired him, but she alleged that she did not hire him to kill her. He did that on his own, she said. I just wanted to scare her.
There was no intention to kill her. I didn't know that it's like that. In fact, I thought he's not going to kill her. He is just going to stone the house. You know, you throw the stone there.
$3,000 to stone the house?
Yes, to stone the house. And make her feel sorry as revenge for me.
Amelia told us she wanted Sarah scared because she felt that Sarah, throughout their relationship, had disrespected her, did not acknowledge her as a woman with more maternal experience.
Because of the child?
Because of the child. I am not welcome to help. I think she did not like my style. The mother in my culture is revered and respected. I want to be treated with respect. I'm her mother. Mm-hmm. My marriage, she disrespected me. That is a slap on my face, and it is given mortal death to me.
I understand. You were insulted.
Oh my God. Million words more than that. Showing disrespect to a mother is death.
Is it enough, though, to have someone killed?
Yes. Because it killed me.
I think she was trying to portray herself as this poor little old lady who was as much a victim as anything. We weren't buying any of it. I mean, it's pure evil. There's no other way to describe, what happened here.
Then, detectives ask Amelia the question they've been trying to answer since day one.
Is Lorenzo involved?
No.
Does he know to this day what happened?
No. I do not want to tell my son. Because if I tell him, he will have problems. He loves the woman very much.
He's still in love with her?
Yeah.
Does Michael know anything about this?
No. I will not tell him.
Despite Amelia's claim that she had no intention for Sarah to be killed, police proceed with charges against her.
We were able to establish that she hired him and paid him. That gave us more than enough to further solidify the case we had against her already.
The case against Ardale Tickles is strengthened when tests match his DNA to blood evidence found at the crime scene.
Both Ardale Tickles and Amelia Raris were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and in Amelia's case, she was charged with the crime of solicitation.
When we first heard that it was Amelia, the feeling was, no, this isn't right.
When I found out about her, I'm like, where the heck did Amelia come from?
I was absolutely shocked that the mother-in-law orchestrated the entire thing, and it was a hitman who did it, was, wow, that was a twist none of us expected. Like, there's no way. It's like out of a movie.
In January of 2000, both Ardale Tickles and Amelia Raris faced trial for the murder of Sarah Raris.
There was no trial for Ardale Tickles.
He was going to go to trial, and Ardale Tickles unexpectedly decides to plead guilty. He's completely remorseful. He says, I shouldn't have done it. And then he got life in prison from the judge.
Amelia Raris enters a plea of not guilty.
She maintained her innocence that she had just paid this guy $3,000 to go throw stones at the house.
I testified at the trial. I was there to let the jury know who Sarah was. I was afraid they would see the sweet, meek little old lady and not believe that someone like that could be evil and could organize this murder.
Ardale Tickles refuses to testify, but prosecutors present the recording of his police interview describing the plot and the crime, as well as the telephone message that captured Sarah's last moments of life.
It was so terrifying. It was so frightening. It was so unspeakably brutal. It was chilling.
After a 7-day trial, Amelia Raris is found guilty of all charges. She is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I was relieved when the guilty verdict was read, and I am glad that they saw through that demeanor that she put on.
For those closest to Sarah, there will always be a void left behind.
She gave joy, she received joy. I really do miss her. I need to hear her laugh.
We lost a really good person that day. We lost a light. And I just hope that, she's happy in God's arms and that she's looking out for Will. I miss her so much.
A good-natured, fun-loving man.
He was just a wonderful person. He was so funny and so charming.
Enjoying his retirement years.
At that point in his life, he was very content, very close to his family, his nieces and nephews.
Is brutally gunned down a month before his wedding.
It was point-blank assassination.
There's a big puddle of blood. Oh my God!
Investigators pieced together a series of clues.
We had to look at what role that upcoming wedding had and what happened.
They'd have their arguments, they had their differences.
Was the scene staged to cover up an intentional killing? The investigation kept hitting dead end after dead end.
And chased down multiple suspects.
It was a whodunit. We were hoping for that break to come.
Revealing a plot fueled by greed.
He was somebody who had had a criminal history of theft and assault.
Just when police are close to making an arrest,
it was like he had just got smacked in the head with a baseball bat.
They uncovered damning evidence pointing to a surprising suspect.
You never expect anything like this.
And then all of a sudden the kill was right in front of us.
On a warm July afternoon in 2014, the sleepy Pittsburgh suburb of Kennedy Township is rocked by a panicked call to 911.
Okay, what's going on?
I just come home from work, and my husband, he's been on the ground. He's dead. There's a big puddle of blood.
Police, fire, and ambulance are coming, okay?
Oh, my God!
The woman who made the 911 call, Carol Lapaya, says the victim is her soon-to-be husband, 59-year-old Jack Parks.
When I arrived on scene, the first thing I noticed is that the victim's head was covered in blood. It was on closer examination that you could see it was a gunshot wound. One challenge we had right out of the gate was that there was no casing or gun found. We don't move his body until it can be photographed. It was possible there was a gun underneath him that no one had seen, so we weren't 100% sure if the gunshot wound at that point had been self-inflicted or homicide. We looked for a while. Unfortunately, we didn't find any type of gun.
Detectives searched for any signs of what happened to Jack and who pulled the trigger.
It was pretty clear right off the bat that this was some type of a home invasion or robbery that occurred.
It didn't look like a struggle had ensued in the room, but once you walked through the victim's house, the further you got into it, the more you realized the level of disarray it was in. And as you went into the dining room, you started to see jewelry box here, a drawer gone through here, papers rifled through. Upstairs, there was just complete disarray. The drawers were all pulled out. The clothing that was inside the drawers was strewn everywhere. Jewelry boxes flipped open, empty watch boxes laying there.
We were trying to determine, was the scene staged? Was someone just trying to make it look like a robbery or a burglary, and when in fact they're just trying to cover up an intentional killing where they intended just to walk in and execute somebody? The house was dusted and processed for DNA and fingerprints. We then began to process the outside of the residence, looking for any type of forced entry, and none of that was found.
Our first thoughts were the victim either knew the actor or was familiar with him. That's just our first impression. So, who was friends with the victim, who would have access to the victim, who would have opportunity to the victim, and who would he trust?
It really was a shocking case. He was killed execution style. This homicide happened in an area that we don't normally have murders.
Jack's death is the first homicide in Kennedy Township in 10 years. The news stuns his family and friends.
When I got that phone call and I heard Carol's voice, I knew something was wrong. And she said, "Jack's gone." I said, "What do you mean, gone?" She said, "He's dead." And then she said he was murdered. And I just went into shock.
Jack Parks was born the second of 5 kids in Pittsburgh in 1955. Friends and family were everything to him.
Jack always made friends. He was one of the best people I've ever known. He would do anything for anybody. We first met in first grade. We hit it off all through high school. And after that, it was a good ride.
Jack was so well liked. He could be charming when he wanted to and funny. He was just a wonderful person.
In 1989, a chance encounter changed Jack's life.
Jack met Carol at the local bar, and I guess they hit it off.
They were 2 peas in a pod. Since he brought Carol, we fell in love with Carol.
Jack was very close to his family. He had about 9 nieces and nephews.
Jack and Carol used to have their nieces and nephews over for sleepovers, making the popcorn and just having a good time. You'd have swore that Jack and Carol were the parents. They didn't have kids, so when those kids were around, they were their kids.
Jack had recently retired, but had big plans for the future.
At that point in his life, Jack was very content. Him and Carol were going to get married.
They've been together for over 25 years. Carol in the beginning really wanted to get married, and Jack didn't. And then at one point, Jack wanted to get married, and Carol didn't. And I used to tell Jack, you know what, I like to be living when you get married, when you say I do. And then when they set the date, I was so happy. It was going to be an exciting, very exciting day.
Tragically, Jack was murdered a month before the ceremony was to take place.
Her and Jack were going to be married on August 31st of that year, and it was really sad. It was so close.
At 5 p.m. on July 21st, 2 hours after Carol found Jack dead, police questioned her at the station.
Talking to Carol was so important because, first of all, we had to determine whether she was or wasn't involved, and we wanted to just get the best timeline from her. During the interview with Carol, she explained that she had left for work as usual, her normal time, about 5:40. She starts work at 6. Everything was fine when she left for work. It wasn't until a realtor called her about a potential buyer for Jack's late mother's home. And when the realtor couldn't get a hold of Jack, Carol started to worry. She tried to call Jack and there was no answer.
So then she got concerned. He always called her back every time that she tried to get a hold of him. So I think it was approximately about 2 o'clock she left work and then come over and find Jack, of course.
Detectives know that spouses are always the first suspect and must determine if they can trust Carol's version of events.
We have a timeline between 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. when she returns home. In some cases, if a person's a cold-blooded killer, they may have killed him before she left the house, and then all of a sudden she finds him and the killer's right in front of us.
Her demeanor, she was very upset, but you can't take a chance by skipping a stone and not trying to look at her.
Detectives are suspicious of why it took the couple so long to decide to get married, and if someone had cold feet.
Something that we thought is, are either one of them having affairs with someone else? Could that be a possible motivation, and is this upcoming wedding triggering that?
Coming up, detectives uncover a family feud.
They just decided to distance themselves from not let him come to the house.
And learn Jack's inner circle isn't as loving and devoted as it first seems.
Things got more contentious.
As police keep digging, more suspects surface.
We learned of several burglaries.
They had concerns about the employees. They hire criminals.
Just when the investigation is about to hit another dead end.
We had no idea who would have done this.
Detectives make a crucial discovery.
It was exactly what we needed.
When we got the phone records back, it was, oh my God.
That was an aha moment.
Kennedy Township Police are investigating the area's first homicide in a decade. 59-year-old Jack Parks was found dead in his home by his fiancée Carol in what appears to be a robbery. But since there was no forced entry, investigators try to determine if this was actually a staged attack, and if the motive was something more personal.
When we interviewed Carol, we had to look at what role, if any, that upcoming wedding had in what happened. We had to start looking at every aspect of their lifestyle. What were the family dynamics? We had to chip away at a number of things in their life. Things that happened that day, but also things that might have happened in the past that could be a motivation for this murder.
They had their differences. They'd have their arguments. But it wasn't my point to get involved in their squabbles.
We kept talking more and more about any kind of problems that they had had in their home. And I asked her, do either of them have a gun? And she said that they did not.
Carol says she would never do anything to hurt the love of her life. She wanted to marry him. Jack was her soulmate.
Jack and Carol, they loved each other. They felt they were already married. To everybody, they were husband and wife years before, the wedding was planned.
Carol was very upset. It was very difficult to talk to her while she processed that emotion, but then to still get the information we needed to keep moving the investigation forward. To me, that was a sign that she wasn't involved.
With suspicion shifting from Carol for now, investigators explore whether theft was the main motive.
The bedroom was ransacked. The mattress was disturbed. Things were emptied out of drawers.
Carol had indicated to me some items that should be there. Their wedding rings that they had bought. Jack collected some coins. He had some expensive watches. She indicated that the watches should be in the boxes. When we first processed the areas of disarray, none of those items were there. That was our first big clue to go off of. I knew that if we could find that jewelry, we could find who was involved. We didn't know if the person who took it might have given it to someone else, but we had to start with where is it, who has it, and how did they get it.
The next morning, the autopsy report comes in.
He was taken out with one shot and to the right side of his head. It took it to a level where you know that is someone who probably came there with the intent to either use that weapon to intimidate or control Jack. There was a projectile that was recovered from his skull, and we were able to determine that we were looking for this .380.
So that was a good start for us. Now we knew what kind of gun we were looking for.
During the victim's autopsy, you could see that there were no wounds on his hands at all. There were no scratches, there were no broken fingernails. Nothing that seemed to indicate that he had had a chance to fight back. He had been caught completely off guard.
During Carol's interview, she indicated to police that Jack's nephew, Bradley Johnson, is someone they should look into.
Bradley was living across the street with his mother and father, across the street from Jack. And he was always over there. And from what I understand, he was one of the last ones to see Jack alive.
We made contact with Bradley, and Bradley had told us that he had gone over to Jack's house on the 21st, and he said he got there around 10:30 in the morning.
Detectives find that timing suspicious. They know Jack was killed sometime between 6 a.m. and 3 p.m. that day.
I asked him, I said, Bradley, what did you go over there to talk to him about? And he said, well, Jack's mother had passed away, and he knew that Jack was looking to sell the home. But Bradley wanted to negotiate a deal with Jack, and he wanted to talk to Jack alone because he said, I don't want Carol weighing in on this. I wanted this to be a Parks family matter, and I want to discuss it with him. In his words, I didn't want her putting her 2 cents in. And that was a phrase that seemed to hint at some kind of animosity.
Bradley tells investigators that he finds Carol too controlling and that she shouldn't have a say in this family decision.
Jack wanted to wait until he could talk with Carol about it, which sort of defeated the purpose of why Bradley had gone there when she wasn't home. So he said he ended up leaving and they were going to revisit the conversation later.
As investigators press him further, Bradley reveals an alarming fact.
We did ask him about any firearms that he owned, and when Bradley told us he owned a .380 caliber pistol, it kind of was like, okay, this maybe something broke bad, because now we know Carol leaves for work at 6 a.m. and Jack's alive at 10:30 because Brad's telling us he's over there.
He indicated he had left about 11:15. With Bradley's timeline, it definitely seemed that Bradley was very close in time to when Jack would have been killed. And he put himself there. He had the same type of gun.
Had the discussion about Jack's mother's house turned fatal?
With the timing of Bradley's conversation with Jack, it made me wonder whether things got more contentious than he was alluding to in my interview with him, or did he leave there upset, or did somebody else come back and do something to Jack? It had to be looked into.
"12 hours after Jack Parks was found dead, investigators chased down leads around their latest person of interest, Jack's nephew, Bradley Johnson.
When I found out that Bradley was a suspect, I was mad. I was really upset, knowing that they thought that. But then again, when it comes to an investigation, police are doing their job.
Bradley and Jack had a disagreement, and he admits to owning the same caliber gun.
So that definitely stepped up our interest in Bradley. This is a gun that we needed to take a look at.
Bradley's gun was collected, taken to the lab where it was test fired. The ballistics on the gun did not match the projectile that was recovered from Jack during the autopsy.
With nothing concrete linking Bradley to the murder, he is dropped as a suspect. Detectives also corroborate Carol's alibi.
On the day that this happened, we were able to verify that she was at work and she was accounted for at that time. We were able to eliminate Carol as a suspect.
Looking for new leads, detectives speak to the other nieces and nephews who were close to Jack.
During our interview of Carol, she had told us about her nephew, Michael LaPea, who was almost like a son to her, and he had been at the house a lot.
They got along good. Michael joined the military. Jack was very proud of Michael. Jack took pride in the nieces and nephews because he watched them grow up.
Michael was brought in to the homicide office and interviewed about Jack's murder. And during that interview, Michael had said that he was unemployed. He was trying to seek help through the VA hospital due to his PTSD from being in the Army. Michael had been discharged from the military due to his use of cannabis.
Michael also admits he'd fallen out with the family, including his aunt and uncle, and hadn't seen them in a year.
He specifically denied being over near the victim's house, and he made reference to them being estranged. Michael had a bit of a drug problem, and Carol and Jack decided to distance themselves from Michael and not let him come to the house.
Detectives still need to know where Michael was when Jack was killed.
We knew Carol left around 6 a.m. We knew that Bradley was there about 10:30. We knew Carol found him around 3 o'clock. So there's a window of opportunity of about 4 hours. He told us he was at home in Sharpsburg on the day of the incident, July 21st, 20 minutes away from Jack's house.
He said that his girlfriend had kind of unexpectedly taken the day off and they spent the day together. Nothing out of the ordinary. He gave us some landmarks on our timeline that we could check out. Michael and his girlfriend Melanie had gone and done some shopping in the town that they lived in. He said that he had had a doctor's appointment at the VA hospital later that afternoon. These were things at businesses and locations that we could check from doing surveillance video or getting sales transactions. Michael's girlfriend Melanie did corroborate his activities, and she stated they had spent the day together.
It was determined that his alibi had checked out.
A day into the investigation, with Jack's closest circle cleared, investigators escalate the search for the missing jewelry.
We were physically going to many pawn shops to try to see if anybody had sold this jewelry. We didn't get any traction with that.
That's when we started doing a canvass of the neighborhood.
When we were doing our neighborhood canvass, so many people had mentioned near their house there's a meat factory, and they had concerns about the employees. We had heard things like they hire people with records, they hire criminals. From talking to Carol, she said they have a straight view into Carol and Jack's home, and Jack had mentioned sometimes he would let people use his phone or use the bathroom when they were on their break, and it upset her.
In a case like this, you may see, hey, look at this guy, he got some gold on. It's a crime of opportunity.
We knew that they got their morning break right around the time when people stopped hearing from Jack, so we definitely wanted to look into that and see what the consensus was over there.
I think we did like almost 40 interviews of all the employees to see who they were.
One worker in particular piques police interest.
Ronald Levins was a name that came up from multiple employees in the context of people who had gone over to Jack's. This may be the person that Carol was aware that had come over there. Ronald Levins was somebody who had had a criminal history of petty theft and assault, so he was on our radar for sure.
Investigators work quickly to bring Ronald in for an interview.
Ronald indicated that he had known Jack and they were actually friendly, and that's why he was allowed to come into the house when Carol wasn't home. Carol said she would get upset with Jack. She would say, "Jack, don't just let anyone in our house. You can't do that." And he would just, kind of shrug it off. But she just didn't want people coming into the house that she didn't know.
Investigators asked Ronald point blank if he had anything to do with Jack's murder.
He said he had no involvement in Jack's death. The day that Jack was killed, Ronald didn't come to work. He had actually taken scheduled vacation for Friday and Monday. Ronald Blevins' alibi checked out, and we were able to eliminate him as a suspect in this case.
Desperate for a new lead, investigators look for similarities with other robberies in the area.
After Jack's murder, we talked to the local authorities, and during that we learned of several burglaries, one of which an older lady was burglarized and about $5,000 worth of quarters were taken.
Jack's killer had stolen his coins as well as jewelry. Is this the same person? And could they strike again?
The neighbors were very afraid. We still have a killer out there.
It was a whodunit. Once something like this happened, you think that anything's possible now.
Police investigating the cold-blooded shooting of Jack Parks suspect his murder could be linked to another recent robbery in the neighborhood.
We learned that during that burglary, there were some items similar to what Jack had that were taken, and it was a burglary that happened during the day, which is the timeline we were looking at in this particular incident. Oftentimes in our investigations, we see that residential burglaries are done during the day in bedroom communities where the chance of the people inside the home being at work are better, and that way they can go in and they can take what they need without fear of being caught.
With Jack being retired and home all day, had he caught the burglar red-handed and paid the ultimate price? The neighboring police department already has a suspect in custody.
Vernon Zielinski was identified as a possible suspect in this case. He had been recently arrested.
The items that Vernon was accused of taking were coins, while Jack had coins that were missing. So Vernon Zielinski was tracked down and he was interviewed. We really just wanted to do an interview and determine what connection, if any, he had to Jack. During the interview, he said that he had been arrested for the burglary, but that burglary was at an old employer's house. He denied knowing Jack, and he said that the day that this happened, he was actually at work.
We confirmed that through his new employer, that he was working that day, during the time frame that this would have occurred.
Vernon was somebody we were absolutely able to rule out of being directly involved. At that stage in the investigation, we had no idea who might have done this and why.
48 hours after Jack's murder, with no arrests in the case, fear is growing in Kennedy Township.
Everyone was concerned that how in broad daylight can someone walk into a house, kill somebody, and walk out without even being seen.
The hardest thing to comprehend was the murder. It was point-blank assassination. Stone-cold killing. You never expect anything like this. I know I didn't.
Waiting for an arrest. You're still in that daze of trying to process it all. He's not coming back. It's just too unbelievable. Is this going to be another murder unsolved?
We had a lot of information to go on, and we were constantly moving the investigation forward. People were being eliminated, further suspects were being developed.
3 days after Jack was discovered dead, police get a major break.
A local pawn shop in Sharpsburg, PA, which is another small little borough within Allegheny County, the owner had called the local police due to some suspicious activity. On the day of the incident, July 21st, he said a gentleman came in with a cachet of gold and was trying to sell it to him.
What the employee found to be concerning was, first of all, the jewelry was manipulated. It was very distinguishable pieces, but they had been, it seemed to be hammered or just manipulated in a way that would make them hard for law enforcement to identify. It threw up a red flag to him, but also he seemed to think that this was a person who had sold him stolen jewelry in the past. So he didn't buy the jewelry, but he also had the foresight to know he wanted to see where this jewelry might have come from. He knew it was important to get a picture of it. So he took a photograph of the items that this person was trying to sell.
He provided us with the photographs, and they were taken to Carol, who viewed them.
She became very upset. She started crying, and she said, "That's our jewelry."
It felt like we were closing in. Based upon the photograph of the jewelry, we were able to get that out to the local department. They could share it with the pawn shop owners in town if anyone comes in with this.
Investigators hope they can identify the seller.
The pawn shop owner was able to give a good description of the person who brought the jewelry in. A younger white male, black hair, and thin build. That description was provided to the local police chief in Sharpsburg, and he thought that fit the description of the white male from that area. It gave us a very good lead in this case. A photo array was put together to include 8 individual photographs, and they were shown to the shop owner.
We have a set of instructions that we give them, and we say, the person that we're looking for may or may not be in here, but if you see the person, indicate it on the lineup. So once he reviewed the photo array, he did identify who that person was. It was a huge break. It was exactly what we needed.
Coming up, police find stunning evidence pointing to Jack's killer.
In the video, we knew exactly who it was.
This was a shock to everyone.
You never thought that would happen. It would be that person.
But making an arrest wouldn't be easy.
She provided alibis for him and just denials.
Until investigators find proof no one can deny.
Those records don't lie.
Detectives have just identified the man who tried to pawn murder victim Jack Park's jewelry. His name? Brian Gibbons.
He's been a known thief to the local police department. We went after that lead strong.
We were feeling pretty confident that Mr. Gibbons may be our man, or at least know who our man was. We were very excited and very motivated to go find him.
Brian has a long history of petty crimes, but investigators need to determine if he's a killer. 4 days after the murder, they get a warrant to search his home.
Specifically, we were looking for any of the very distinguishing items that Jack Parks had. Unfortunately, we didn't find any of the victim's jewelry in the house, but we did find some items that did turn out to be stolen from someone else.
Based upon the search at Mr. Gibbons' residence, we were able to arrest him and have him sent to the county jail.
Investigators question Brian about Jack's missing jewelry.
He said that he didn't have anything to do with it. At that point, we were trying to determine if perhaps he'd been given some jewelry to sell, that maybe he didn't know its origin and he went to go sell it. We really just wanted to see if we could come up with any connection to rule him either in or out on the homicide of Jack Parks.
Brian tells detectives he doesn't know the victim and has never been to his home.
He said he had no connection to Jack at all. He denied having any knowledge of the Jack Parks homicide. We asked, well, what's your alibi? And he goes, I was arrested for entering an abandoned house that day. And that was confirmed. Brian was not the killer. He had a solid alibi.
It was clear that he was not the same individual who had come in to the store on that Monday and tried to sell the jewelry.
The pawn shop owner mistakenly identified the wrong person.
The investigation kept hitting dead end after dead end.
We thought we had it, but then once we eliminated him, we took a pause. We just stepped back a minute, not start all over, but then keep everything else in perspective.
While detectives hunt for new leads, Jack's loved ones struggle with their grief. Instead of looking forward to Jack's wedding, 5 days after his murder, they attend his funeral.
When he told me he was going to get married, his brother and I would have stood up for him. I was proud because I was never a best man. And there I was, carrying his casket. God, to have something like that happen in such a quick time, it's devastating to everybody.
You feel the hurt, but it really doesn't sink in until the funeral's all over. And then the shock is over. It's reality. He's gone.
Fearing the case could go cold, a week after the murder, police step up the hunt for Jack's stolen jewelry, hoping the culprit is still attempting to sell it at a pawn shop.
We all just sort of fanned out, and we took particular geographical areas. We knew there was still a person that was out there trying to sell Jack's jewelry, and we had to just keep holding out hope that the pawn shop would take their identification, that they would keep good records. That's what kept us going, honestly. There is a detective in the city of Pittsburgh who is a pawn shop records analyst, and I reached out to her and I told her what items that we had missing, and on August 4th I heard back from her, and she told me that she had found the jewelry where it had been sold.
Investigators race to the pawn shop.
We had to go take a physical look at it, see who, if anybody, was on camera. Some store policies, all they have to do is take an individual's driver's license number. They don't even have to make a photocopy of it. So we were trying to remain optimistic that somehow we would get an image of the actual person who tried to sell that jewelry. It could have been anyone at that point.
The pawn shop has surveillance video, and what detectives see on tape is jaw-dropping.
It was, oh my God.
We knew exactly who it was. In the video, it was Michael Apaya, which was Carol's nephew that Jack raised like one of his own.
This was a shock to everyone.
When we first had dealings with Michael, early on in the investigation, he did provide an alibi about businesses he was at, doctor's appointments.
Michael had his girlfriend Melanie saying that he was with her during the time that Jack would have or could have been killed. So it was kind of going back, trying to retrace what he had initially told us.
We still had to do a little bit more digging. We had to work on if we were missing something. Early on, when we talked to Michael, he had given detectives his phone number. I wanted to get his phone records.
While investigators wait for those records, they call Michael back in.
We are going to interview him and see what he has to say now that we have him on tape pawning his uncle's jewelry.
We decided that it would probably be ideal to bring Michael and his girlfriend Melanie in at the same time, being that she was the person who was providing an alibi for him, and chip away at that and see where the truth lied. We took them both back to our office, and they were interviewed in separate rooms. Michael, in his interview, was initially very adamant that he had nothing to do with this. He denied involvement with the murder, involvement with the jewelry, and he just would not deviate from that.
Melanie stands by her story, too.
She provided alibis for him and just denials.
Melanie is pretty much telling us that he was with her during the time that Jack would have or could have been killed.
She was just defensive and trying to argue with what we knew was not true. And that was that he had sold Jack's jewelry. We showed her a picture of the jewelry and she tried to say it was hers. And we knew that was a lie.
With neither Michael nor Melanie cracking under the pressure, detectives need something to break the deadlock.
When we got the information about the cell phone records, it was a huge break. We were very happy that it finally had come through. It was like everything came full circle.
2 weeks after Jack Parks was shot to death in his own home, investigators get the break in the case they needed: incriminating cell phone GPS data.
When I got Michael's phone records, I started to see where generally he spent most of his time, which was consistent with his home.
He told us he was in Sharpsburg, 20 minutes away from Jack's house, on the day of the incident.
Parts of his alibi checked out, cell phone data-wise, but there was an anomaly where about 11:45, his cell phone pinged over in the area of Jack and Carol's house. To me, the significance of 11:45 was it is in this time where Carol can't reach Jack.
It would be impossible to be in Sharpsburg and your phone ping off a tower in Kennedy Township. The amount of distance between the two, it wouldn't be possible. He was not at home. He was over near his uncle's house.
So 11:45, Michael's phone being over there was an aha moment. Those records don't lie.
Detectives want to see how Michael will react when confronted with his own cell phone records.
It was like he had just got smacked in the head with a baseball bat. He became very quiet, took a second, and he just let it all out.
I was suffering from PTSD, and the morning of July 21st, I asked Mel to take a ride with me. She just drove down with me and I parked her car. I told her to wait. She never got out of the car. She had no clue where we were going.
Michael's explanation of why he went to see Jack only raises more suspicion.
About a year ago, I was accused of stealing jewelry, and I wanted to make amends. I wanted to fix it. I knocked on a door to apologize and talk. At that time, he became hostile, and he choked me and swung at me.
His story changed to self-defense.
He had 2 hands around my neck, and at that time I felt my life was threatened, and I had a pistol 380 on me. It went off.
Reconciling that just wasn't possible. Jack was shot one time right close to his ear. Basically, someone held a gun to his head and executed him.
He fell to the floor, and I panicked. Ren grabbed jewelry, and I left.
Michael tells detectives he sold the jewelry for $1,000. Even more shocking is what he spent the money on.
You stated that that's one of the people you sometimes purchase narcotics from.
Yes. I gave him about $600 to $700.
In addition to that, several days later, what did he give you?
He gave me heroin.
Michael was following a path of substance abuse that was getting to be more addictive drugs, and his use was increasing. It wasn't recreational anymore. It was more the behavior of an addict.
It was heartbreaking for us to know that someone who was almost like Jack's son, a very close family member, would do something like that in exchange for a couple of dollars to get high.
I believe Michael went to that house to take jewelry. He knew Jack was there, and the only way he was going to get that jewelry is if Jack was dead. He walked up to the house, and as soon as Jack met him at the door and turned his back to him, he shot him, and he fell, and he died instantly.
On August 5th, 2014, Michael LaPaya is charged with first-degree murder.
To say to Carol, we know who did this. It was hard, but the hardest answer that we had for her is when she said, Michael who? And he had the same last name as her, really. It was hard to tell her that, it's your nephew. And it just hit her, and she was very upset.
You never thought that would happen. It would be that person.
It's still to this day so hard to believe that somebody that they loved, Michael, could have done something like this. I mean, what he did, I can't describe. There's no words.
At trial, Michael is found guilty. On December 9th, 2015, the 24-year-old is sentenced to life in prison.
He took a loving, caring man and just executed him. There was no winners. We lost Jack. Who won? Nobody.
I would never forgive him. Michael took away my best friend, my brother. He took away a lot from me. To this day, I still hate the guy.
Jack will never be forgotten. In the beginning, it's hard talking about a loved one without really breaking down crying. But you continue to talk about him. You keep their memory alive. And that's how he stays with us.
Every day, he's here in my mind, my heart, and my dreams. I see his face. Always smiling. I know he's flying with the angels.
A self-made couple making plans for the next stage of their lives.
They were getting ready to have a quiet retirement.
They were such a beautiful couple. They would give you your shirt off their back.
They had a lot of friends and loved spending time with family.
Gunned down, execution style, in their own home.
It just seemed to make no sense. Who would do that, and what could possibly be the motive?
While searching for the killer, investigators uncover a world of greed and deceit.
We looked at desperation. She was desperate for money.
He felt he had been treated badly, basically kicked to the curb.
People were saying that he was very upset. It certainly is motive.
A series of chilling discoveries.
We learned that he was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Everything he's told us is a lie.
Points to a killer no one ever imagined.
People were shocked.
It shows what a messed up psyche he's got.
It was unbelievable how somebody can be that cold-blooded.
On the outskirts of La Crosse, Wisconsin, lies the prestigious neighborhood of Berry Mills. In early spring of 2010, this quiet community is rocked by a disturbing 911 call.
911, what is the address to David? Okay, what's going on?
I'm at my mom and dad's house. I came out to check that on the...
Your dad is what?
He's on the floor.
Where's your mom?
My mom is by the computer.
Is your mom breathing?
No.
Okay, and your dad is not breathing?
No.
Okay, all right.
Police race to the scene. First responding officers lead 40-year-old Eric Cola away from his deceased parents' home, while detectives head inside.
We could see that there was a male lying on the kitchen floor. There was a large pool of blood around his head.
The blood was coagulated, so it had been there a while. You know, it wasn't fresh blood.
He was holding his car keys in one hand. He had his coat on, so it was clear that he had just walked in the door. He hadn't even set everything on the counter yet. As I viewed the male victim, the wounds appeared to be a gunshot. It was near the temple of his head.
Around the corner is like a hallway entryway with a computer desk, and the female victim was there. She was shot in the head also.
Their hands are on the keyboard, and so you could see that she had been typing before she was shot. What she was typing didn't appear to be significant, but it made us believe that she had no idea that someone was behind her going to shoot her. It appeared that they ambushed them.
The victims are identified as 68-year-old Dennis Cola and his wife, 65-year-old Myrna. As investigators examine the scene, they make note of other telling details.
We didn't know if it was a single killer or more than one person, but you would expect more disturbance if there were more than one, or that they would have overpowered the victims, and that didn't seem to have happened.
With Myrna sitting at the computer comfortably, it led us to wonder if she was the first to be killed. And her husband, Dennis, came home, and he was the second one shot. There was the smell of decomposition. At that point, we weren't sure how many days earlier they were killed, but we needed to get information pretty quickly.
Detectives find no sign of forced entry and no indication of any kind of struggle.
The crime lab comes in. They collect fingerprints and DNA and the computer for analysis. We went upstairs and we noticed in the one bedroom there was a dresser that was disturbed, and it appeared that it had been ransacked. What was unusual about it was the person started at the top and worked their way down with the chest of drawers. But if you did it that way, you wouldn't be able to see what was in the drawer below it.
This looked like someone was trying to make it look like a burglary, but nothing seemed to be missing.
And there were many other valuables in the house, including Myrna's purse, and Dennis' wallet was still in his back pocket. It looked like this was staged, quite frankly.
While investigators continue searching for clues, they find what could be a key piece of evidence.
The bedroom had a .22 rifle in the closet. There's also a box of .22 shells on a shelf that had been moved and partially opened.
That was very possibly the gun that was used in the homicides.
So the gun is sent to the crime lab for an analysis.
As the crime scene investigation continues, news of the murders spreads quickly through the close-knit community.
When I heard about it, I thought, I can't believe this is happening. I was devastated. It hit me real hard. It was like, why would somebody kill them? And everybody loved them.
Born and raised in Wisconsin, Dennis and Myrna Kola had been happily married for 42 years.
Dennis and Myrna had a lot of friends. They had deep roots here.
They had children and grandchildren, and they were very popular.
I didn't hear of anyone that had anything bad to say about either one of them.
From humble beginnings, Dennis rose to become a successful businessman.
Dennis had graduated as a pharmacist, and he had owned a number of pharmacies and businesses throughout the years in different locations.
I worked with him for 2 years. As a boss, he was down to earth, fantastic guy. If you needed something, he was there. He treated me like a daughter.
Dennis was successful in life and in love.
Him and his wife, they were always happy, having a good time. Myrna had a lot of energy. She was very sociable.
Myrna was very well educated, and she was presently teaching part-time on a substitute basis.
They had a good marriage. They enjoyed life.
The couple had 2 children, their son Eric and 37-year-old daughter Cindy. Both were married with families of their own.
Their family seemed pretty tight. Dennis and Myrna, they were involved with their kids and involved with their grandkids.
These were parents who were very dedicated. They really wanted the best for their kids and loved spending time with family. Dennis and Myrna were getting ready to have a quiet retirement and relaxing and enjoying life.
Now, those dreams have been brutally snatched away.
Both shot. I would have never in my life expected something like this to happen.
It just seemed to make no sense. We're trying to understand who would do that and what would be the motive.
While police bring the Kola's son Eric into the station to get more information, investigators go door to door looking for witnesses.
We start canvassing to see if anyone saw anything, heard anything.
Nobody in the neighborhood had seen anything suspicious.
For them, it was just mostly shock. They couldn't believe that these 2 people had been killed.
As detectives continue to search for a lead, they get their first break.
One of the neighbors mentioned that He thought he knew the motive and why it happened, and also the murder.
He was very concerned. He believed that his life was in danger. He felt that he may be next.
This neighbor, Steve Burgess, was a banker, and he thought that he may have been the intended target of the homicide. His reasoning was he had got a threatening call multiple times from a person that threatened to kill him.
Coming up, new evidence emerges.
The day after the homicides, he cashed his $50,000 check and never told us.
And family secrets come to light.
There was some jealousy, maybe bad blood between the two.
Dennis always complained that he was worthless and that he didn't want to work.
She had apparently lit into Dennis in a rage.
Until a disturbing clue reveals a twisted plan.
Someone had put this threatening note in his mailbox.
Now he believes that someone was out to get him.
And exposes a cold-blooded betrayal nobody saw coming.
I never thought he was the kind of person that would do something like that.
It was extremely unexpected.
It's just chilling.
Grandparents Myrna and Dennis Kola have been brutally executed in their own home. Now, one of their neighbors, banker Steve Burgess, tells investigators the killer could be coming after him.
He was very concerned, and he believed that someone was out to get him, and he didn't know who, but the homicides may have been intended for him and his family.
Detectives ask Steve why someone would want him dead.
So at that time, the market crashed. There was people with money issues.
A lot of people came to him at the bank for loans, but they had no collateral, so people were very angry that Steve would not give them loans. The last threat was a couple of days earlier. It was a threat of violence. It certainly had to be taken serious.
If Steve was the intended target, how did Dennis and Myrna end up gunned down instead?
What he explained was a Google Earth search in front of Burgess's house showed the wrong address, showed Dennis and Myrna's address instead of his, and he thought that the killer killed the wrong people.
He felt that somebody had come to his house to follow through on the threat, but they ended up at Dennis and Myrna's residence. It was a concern that this possibly could have been a mistake on behalf of the murderer, and the homicides were not intended for Dennis and Myrna.
Before investigators can pursue the lead, the autopsy results arrive.
The autopsy report determined that they were both shot with a .22 caliber rifle.
But it was inconclusive. There wasn't enough bullet fragment left to tell if it came from the gun that we found in the house. No fingerprints were found. I mean, even from the victims, like the gun had been cleaned up.
The autopsy report also confirmed that they had been deceased for a few days before the 911 call. It was likely that they were killed on that Friday.
The time of death sheds new light on the threatening phone call made to neighbor Steve Burgess.
We saw that call had come in Sunday morning after the Kolas were murdered. So the timeline it didn't make any sense.
We were able to determine that the threats against Steve Burgess had nothing to do with the deaths of Dennis and Myrna.
With their first lead a bust, detectives turn their attention closer to home.
We knew Eric and his sister Cindy were very close to their parents.
Eric did day trading and stuff like that, work on stocks. He was doing well. Dennis and Eric were pretty close. Some people would say like bread and butter. They'd have get-togethers all the time.
Eric was the one that found the bodies. We needed a conversation with Eric for information that he might be able to provide us.
Hoping he can provide details about the crime, investigators interview Eric at the station.
Eric was still extremely emotional over the deaths of his parents, but he said he wanted to be as helpful as he possibly could and would do whatever he could to try to find who was responsible.
Detectives ask how he came to find his parents had been killed.
He said the school called and said that Myrna hadn't shown up for work. They called his parents and they didn't respond.
So Eric tried calling and was unable to get an answer, so he called his sister and asked if she had any contact with them, and she had not.
He became concerned and drove over to the house.
Once he walked in the house, he observed his father lying on the kitchen floor and started searching for his mom, and then also found her deceased.
Eric said he was extremely close to his parents. His dad, supported all of his endeavors. They were just the best of buddies.
We asked Eric what was the last time he had seen his parents, and he said a few days before the homicides.
He visited them like he did all the time. He said his dad was working on the deck, and his mom was doing laundry. There didn't seem to be anything unusual.
Investigators asked Eric where he was on the day of the murders.
He said that Friday was he and his wife's anniversary. He had worked till 2. Then he helped his buddy Mike do some work in a bathroom. They were renovating a bathroom. Eric had told us that he had gone to 2 stores after leaving his buddy's house, looking for a specific plant that his wife liked, a hanging plant.
Eric presents a receipt stamped at 6:15 p.m.
After he bought the plant, he went directly home, and they got ready to go out for the evening with friends to celebrate the anniversary. Eric said that he had tried over the weekend to contact his parents and wasn't able to do so. He was becoming concerned, but just thought that they were busy.
When asked who might have wanted to harm his parents, Eric says they were well-liked and had no enemies.
It seemed really strange, really unusual. No reason for the victims to be killed. Both victims killed.
Before concluding Eric's interview, detectives get results back from the crime lab.
The report came back indicating that the time of death, based on the computer analysis, was 5:41 on that Friday.
Myrna was using the computer, and the last keystroke was 5:41 p.m. So that gave us a timestamp. That's huge.
With the keystroke data, detectives verify Eric's alibi.
We spoke to his friend Mike, and Mike said yes, Eric was here until about 5:30 when he left, and he was going to go to the store. So he basically confirmed what Eric was telling us was correct. The receipt, combined with what his friend Mike said, it appeared that there wasn't enough time for Eric to commit the crime. Also, it just seemed very unlikely that someone who loved his mother and father very much could be involved in something like this.
Before Eric leaves the police station, he remembers crucial information that takes detectives by surprise.
Eric had told us that his sister Cindy and her husband Pat were being financially supported by Dennis and Myrna, and that their dad, Dennis, told Cindy they were getting cut off financially.
The Friday morning of the homicides, Cindy had called Dennis. Dennis let her know that there was not going to be any more money. She became very upset.
Had there been an argument over money leading Cindy to kill?
That's extremely unexpected, but she did have motive, so you start looking at Cindy as a suspect.
Police investigating the double homicide of Dennis and Myrna Cola believe their daughter Cindy may have been angry with her father after he cut off financial support. The two had a tense conversation just hours before the murders.
When we started talking to the circle of friends and family, we were told Dennis was more than generous. He gave tens of thousands to Cindy and her husband.
Cindy relied on her parents. They needed this money to pay their bills. When Dennis had told Cindy that he was cutting her off, she didn't know how those bills were going to get paid.
Detectives learn the Colas children are set to inherit over $700,000 from their parents' death. While son Eric is known in the community as a successful businessman, Cindy's circumstances are different.
Cindy didn't have much money, if any, and she was constantly asking for money. because they were not making ends meet.
She was working a minimum wage job or a little above that, and Pat, her husband, couldn't keep a job, would quit or get fired. They were living paycheck to paycheck and Dennis's handout to handout.
Me and Dennis would talk about Cindy at the pharmacy, and he kept telling me that he was sick and tired of supporting her every month, helping them out with their bills and stuff like that. And that Friday morning, he was very upset, and he said, "My daughter called me this morning, crying on the phone because I told my daughter that I'm cutting her and her husband off."
When she would get upset, she would get just extreme, over-the-top emotions. Cindy hearing that the cash cow was being butchered would be a reason for her to now go off the rails, and it went from bad to worse.
Cindy became a strong suspect.
Police bring Cindy into the station for questioning.
Cindy appeared broke up over the deaths of her parents, but she really laid out the family dynamic. Her parents had considered her the black sheep of the family. She said that she didn't believe her parents cared about her like they cared about Eric, and she was upset with how they treated her.
She told us, according to her parents, that Eric could do no wrong, and that Cindy was a disappointment and continued to be a disappointment.
But Cindy denied that she had anything to do with her parents' death, even though there was this friction between them.
Investigators questioned Cindy about the argument with her father the morning of the murders.
Cindy downplayed the conversation she had with her father. She said just that she was disappointed her father had said he wouldn't give her any money. But it wasn't a negative conversation.
Detectives wonder if Cindy is more guilty than she's letting on.
There was a lot of tension between Cindy and her parents. There was disapproval there.
We looked at desperation. She was desperate for money with the inheritance, and given her bad feelings, all these things could lead to the fact that she may have been the one that took the lives of her parents.
With suspicion swirling, police asked Cindy where she was when her parents were killed.
On Friday, she was working and had left at 4:45. They have a time clock. She had punched out.
After work, she had stopped at the store just after 5:30. She purchased beer and ice, and then her and Patrick at a barbecue with the neighbors.
Police worked to confirm Cindy's alibi.
She was working. That was verified then. Cindy had stopped at a Quick Trip, and the Quick Trips all have video, so she was on camera at a Quick Trip near her home at the time of the homicides, not anywhere near her parents.
While Cindy is ruled out as the shooter, her husband Patrick comes into focus.
Family and friends said that Patrick did not get along with Dennis and Myrna, and Patrick stood to inherit a substantial amount of money along with Cindy.
Dennis did not like her husband at all. He told me that Cindy's husband married Cindy for the money because he knew that Dennis and Myrna had money. Dennis always complained that his son-in-law, Patrick, was worthless and that he didn't want to work. He sits and plays with the video games, and he's too lazy to go find a job.
Investigators dig deeper into Patrick's relationship with his in-laws.
Talking to family and friends, we learned that Dennis and Myrna were upset when Patrick and Cindy got married. They asked Cindy not to marry him. They felt that he lacked motivation, and they remained unhappy with him. And I think the feeling was mutual.
According to some reports, when there was alcohol involved, he could have been a violent person.
Apparently, the Friday morning of the homicides, Cindy told Patrick that they were not going to be getting any more money. People were saying that Patrick was even more angry than Cindy, that they were being cut off financially. It was a large red flag.
Detectives also learned Patrick had the capability to pull off an execution-style hit.
Eric and other relatives were now pointing us toward Patrick, saying that he was a Marine and that he knew how to handle weapons.
It certainly moves Patrick up to the top of the list as far as suspects.
Police hunting the killer of Dennis and Myrna Cola believe their son-in-law, Patrick Cowell, has motive for murder.
Patrick was a great interest to us because he did not get along with Dennis and Myrna, and he stood to inherit a lot of money, so it certainly is motive. And Patrick was in the Marine Corps, so he would be an expert marksman.
When I heard that the police are starting to question him, I thought maybe after Dennis mentioned cutting them off, that might have triggered his son-in-law to kill them both.
At the police station, detectives confront Patrick about his relationship with his in-laws.
Patrick said that he was not popular in that family, that he was not comfortable with them, they weren't comfortable with him. There was kind of a cold relationship. He knew from Cindy that they were being cut off from Dennis and Myrna. He wasn't happy about it, but he denied having any involvement in the homicides.
Investigators press Patrick about where he was at the time of the murders.
He was without a job at the time, and basically he spent most of his day on the sofa with Xbox. We asked if he had any guns in the house, and he agreed that he did. We asked if he would turn those over to us, and he said he would.
As detectives wrap up their interview with Patrick, patrol officers are dispatched to collect the gun and gaming console, which are then sent on to the crime lab.
The gun had been analyzed and, in fact, was eliminated as the weapon used to kill Dennis and Myrna.
Also, we were able to prove through the crime lab that he was on the Xbox at the time he said he was. And so that eliminated him because he was home at the time that Dennis and Myrna were killed.
With Patrick ruled out, police are left scrambling for new suspects. The unsolved homicides leave the community on edge.
When a crime like this happens in a small town, like Berry Mills, there's a lot of pressure on law enforcement to get it solved. People want answers. These aren't strangers to them. These are people they know.
People in that neighborhood were fearful. You know, the closer you are to something like that, the more concerned you are.
We were kind of scared for our lives because we didn't know why something like this would happen.
Looking for new leads, investigators dig into Dennis's business connections and the wealthy pharmacist's other ventures around town.
Dennis had a nephew, Nick Herring, who was promised a business from Dennis. They were going to open a car dealership together and actually did.
What we understood was that Nick was very familiar with running car dealerships and had done a good job.
Business was good, but then Dennis changed the deal.
As the dealership was up and running, Dennis brought Eric, his son, in to start running it with Nick, and there was some jealousy, maybe bad blood between the two.
Nick was complaining all the time, so Dennis had to go help out with the business. Dennis said they could not get along together, and he ended up buying Nick out.
At that point, Nick was quite unhappy, and there was some falling out.
Tension mounted until Dennis sold the business, leaving Nick resentful.
Nick lost a pretty substantial amount of money, so he would certainly have reason to be upset.
Could Nick have harbored a deadly desire for revenge? Police bring him into the station for questioning.
We spoke to Nick Herring, and he admitted that the relationship had soured.
Nick had said that Dennis had given him too low amount for the business and that he got cheated out of some profit. Nick felt that he had been treated badly, basically kicked to the curb by his uncle.
Despite the bad blood, Nick insists he's not involved in the murders.
Nick said that it was in the past that he had started his own car dealership. He was successful, and that although it was upsetting, he wouldn't hold a grudge, and he had no reason to kill Dennis and Myrna.
Nick said that he had worked until about 5:30. Then he had picked up his girlfriend, and they'd gone out to the tavern. We were able to confirm that he was at work all day, and then the bartender where they were at could confirm that he and his girlfriend had spent the evening. And so so we were able to eliminate him.
Having ruled out yet another suspect, the investigation into the Cola murders hits a roadblock.
It was very disturbing because it just seemed to make no sense. Here's a couple that are a retirement age, had long, successful careers. For someone to come in and just murder them, it's senseless. We were still trying to understand who would do that and what would be the motive.
1 week after the murders, police receive news that jolts the investigation back to life.
We get a call that a patrol car is being sent out to Eric Kula's residence for a suspicious item in the mailbox. Eric said that he had got a threatening letter. He was now extremely concerned that he was going to get killed.
One week after Dennis and Myrna Cola are ruthlessly gunned down in their own home, police learn their 40-year-old son Eric has received a threatening note. Could he be the next target?
Someone had put this note in his mailbox. He was really, really concerned. This note said, "Fixed you." The message is kind of unusual, but Eric thought they'd killed his parents and were now going to come after him.
He had no idea who would have left it or where it came from.
There was an envelope, but it wasn't mailed.
The handwriting looked like it was done by someone very young. It was so strange. It was probably written that way so a handwriting analysis couldn't be done.
When it comes to Eric's safety, detectives don't take any chances.
We have to try to figure out what was going on.
We had an investigator and a camera to watch his property. We start canvassing Eric's neighborhood to see if anyone saw anything.
But with no witnesses, police are still left with no idea who placed the note.
This is perplexing. We're trying to determine, was this somebody local or was this someone from out of the area? We were very concerned.
With this new potential threat, investigators cast a wider net to find the Cola's killer. But when they scour Dennis and Myrna's computers, phones, and finances, they're surprised at what they find.
We subpoenaed Dennis and Myrna's bank records and noticed that there's a check written and cashed on Dennis and Myrna's account for $50,000. It's cashed on the day after the murder, and it's made out to Eric Kula and was deposited into Eric's bank account. It seemed really strange. So you just found your parents dead, and the next day you go cash a check for $50K. It had to be looked at.
Detectives reach out to Eric, hoping to learn more details.
Eric's explanation is his dad gave it to him on the day that he had stopped over at his parents' house.
That's very interesting because of all the conversations we had with Eric, he never mentioned this, and suddenly we have a check for $50,000, and if everything was okay, why wouldn't he tell us about it?
To have a check that was deposited the day after the murders by a family member, that set off alarms for investigators.
After we find that check, we look for other checks.
We used a forensic accountant to review Eric's finances because it was quite complicated with the day trading that he was involved in. When the accountant went through it with us and explained what we were looking at, I think we almost fell off our chairs because we had no idea that this was what was going on. He told everybody that he was extremely successful with his day trading, but Eric was broke.
He was day trading, but it was a myth as far as making profit. The person looking at his financials basically called BS. She told us this guy's worth nothing. He's worth about $2,000 total. He was blowing smoke.
Then, police uncover more startling information about Eric's financial circumstances.
We learned that Eric was also going to his parents and receiving large amounts of money. Through the years, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. He led everybody to believe that he was doing so well, including his wife. Eric told her that he was making a lot of money. There was nothing to worry about, that he was just doing great.
Despite everyone's impression that Eric was this successful day trader, his parents had been funding his and his family's lifestyle.
If he was going to have to admit that to family, friends, it was going to be devastating.
Detectives learned when Dennis and Myrna stopped financially supporting their daughter, Cindy, they also cut off Eric.
We knew just shortly before Dennis and Myrna were killed, Eric found out that he was no longer getting money from his parents.
The damning evidence continues to pile up against Eric.
Dennis told me he was giving money to Eric, but basically he was done giving to both kids. He says, I need to tell them I'm done supporting them. It's about time I put my foot down and cut them off.
As investigators start to discover that Eric is not what he seems, shocking results come back from the lab.
The state crime lab did a handwriting analysis on that check for $50,000. It wasn't Dennis's signature on that check. We found out that it was Eric's handwriting, that he had forged his father's name on that check.
Everything he's told us is a lie. So things are starting to really roll toward Eric.
Police obtain a warrant to search Eric's home, hoping to find additional incriminating evidence.
We're in the basement. Among other things, was a box of envelopes in a desk drawer. The fixed U note had a security envelope, and every one of them has a different pattern for their security pattern. Lo and behold, those envelopes have the same pattern. We were able to determine that envelope in Eric's mailbox with the fixed U note came from the box of envelopes in his home. From his fire pit in his backyard, we found things that would be associated with making a fixed U note. A spring from a spiral notebook. The letter was written on spiral notebook paper. A barrel of a pen used to write the address. Those types of things are in the fire. So that fixed U note came from his house. It didn't look good for Eric.
In the search, detectives also discover a .22 caliber rifle, similar to what police believe was the murder weapon. The gun is sent to the ballistics lab for testing.
With the lies and forgery, we were pretty confident that Eric was our guy.
But at that point, Eric had an alibi for the entire time that the homicides were occurring, so we're trying to figure out how he shot Dennis and Myrna.
Detectives investigating the double homicide of Dennis and Myrna Cola suspect the couple's own son, 40-year-old Eric, is the killer. But they need hard evidence to lay charges.
We went out and started re-interviewing witnesses and reviewing all the evidence that we had.
As detectives try to learn more details about Eric's connection to the crime, the ballistics results come back. Police wonder if the rifle found in Eric's home will prove to be the murder weapon.
Dennis and Myrna were shot with a .22 caliber rifle, but Eric's gun wasn't the gun that was involved in the crime.
Undeterred, detectives recheck Eric's alibi for when his parents were being murdered.
The time of death, based on the computer analysis, was 5:41 on that Friday.
Prior to the homicide, Eric said that he'd helped his buddy Mike renovating a bathroom.
When we originally talked to Mike, he said that Eric had left his house about 5:30, but when we re-interviewed him, he said it's very possible it could have been earlier. Once Mike's story changed, we really thought that we were heading in the right direction.
Investigators take a closer look at Eric's timeline.
Eric had told us that he had gone to 2 stores after leaving his buddy's house to get a specific plant for his wife. At the time of the homicide, he had stopped at the first store, and that store didn't have it, so he had to go to the other store, got the plant, and produced a receipt.
Eric's receipt is stamped 6:15 p.m. The second store is located only 10 minutes from the Cola's residence. But where was Eric at 5:41 when his parents were being shot?
We checked with the garden center, the first one he went to, and they had plenty of those plants on the day and time that Eric said that they didn't have any. We also reviewed video footage, and he's not there, nor is his vehicle seen coming or leaving the parking lot. So there was a window of opportunity for Eric to commit the murders. He had no alibi for the time that the computer showed that Myrna was shot.
With Eric's alibi torn apart, detectives bring him in for another interview. They begin by confronting Eric about forging the $50,000 check.
Eric explained that he had permission from his dad to write checks out to himself, and that his dad had actually given him the check, but just was too busy, so told him to sign it himself. He told us, "I write them all the time," and that was commonplace for him to do that. It's a lie, an approvable one. He's never written one. He couldn't produce a single check that he had ever written. He was confronted with the fixed U note and about the envelopes, and that they did come from his house. With what we found and what we knew about his financials, all of those things together are great evidence.
We just went down item after item after item after item, and Eric acted, in my opinion, desperate, and he wanted to leave.
But Eric was no longer free to go. On July 29th, 2010, police charge Eric with the murder of his parents, Dennis and Myrna Cola.
What we believe started this whole crime in motion was the fact that Eric was being cut off financially. He was desperate.
Detectives piece together how the double homicide unfolded.
We believe he went to see his mom at their home, and Myrna was sitting at the computer, and then Eric walked upstairs, got the gun that was located in the closet, came down and shot his mother, and then waited for his father to arrive. When Dennis came home, he was shot almost immediately, within seconds after he walked through that door.
After the murders, Eric wipes the gun clean and returns it to the closet.
Eric then took a check and said to himself, $50,000 will get me through until the will is settled.
After he shot his parents, he went to a garden center, bought the plant for his alibi, and went home to celebrate their anniversary dinner that night.
He's as cold-blooded as a murder-for-hire man. His parents did nothing but love him and take care of him his whole life. He's a narcissistic little son of a bitch and thought that his dad owed him a living.
Eric Cola's arrest stuns the community.
Everyone thought that he was this golden child, that he had a great relationship with his parents, that he was this successful day trader. That he could have done this, people were shocked.
I would have never expected Eric to do this. The way Dennis talked about him, always bragged about his son, and I never thought he was the kind of person that would do something like that.
In June 2012, 2 years after Dennis and Myrna Cola were killed, a jury finds their son Eric guilty of intentional murder.
His sister, Cindy, during the sentencing hearing, was sobbing, and she begged the judge in that courtroom to make sure justice was done that day.
Eric Cola is sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 6 years for forgery.
Many times I've thought about how somebody could do that, and I just simply can't fathom it. I guess we all lose a bit of our innocence when this kind of thing happens.
Myrna and Dennis are still dearly missed by their family and friends.
They were such a beautiful couple. They would give you your shirt off their back. I think of them very, very often. And my memory of Dennis is always a smiley face. I do miss him a lot. Sometimes I still think, boy, why did it have to be you? He'd still be living right now, happy life, finally retired, and enjoying his grandkids. And Myrna would probably still be dragging him on vacation.
A wealthy entrepreneur.
He was very generous and very giving to the community.
And his closest friend.
A good old country boy. He was like a brother.
Are ruthlessly gunned down.
It had all the hallmarks of an execution.
They would have died almost instantaneously.
Police chase down an elusive killer.
A case like this is like a jigsaw puzzle.
We had no hair, no fingerprints, no DNA left behind. Who had a reason to kill both of these men?
It's a complete whodunit.
Until the case takes a jaw-dropping turn.
Oh my gosh, where's my mother?
She was held at gunpoint, tied into a chair, and held captive there for a few days. They had more firepower than our SWAT team had.
And finds a killer.
This just didn't add up.
No one ever suspected.
It was a real shock.
He had, I felt like, 2 different lives.
And then you quickly realize that it was all a lie.
You think it's over, but it's not over.
A killer may have gotten away with murder.
Conway, Arkansas, a small city with southern charm, just outside of Little Rock.
It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your kids. You know, not a lot of crime, and it's made that way because of the people that live there.
But on Sunday, May 19th, 2002, police receive a 911 call that shatters the early evening peace.
There's people shot next door. I don't know what the situation is, but some girls came over running to my house like crazy. They said someone had been shot. Everybody had been shot in that house.
Police race to an upscale home in the city's affluent West End.
Patrol officers went inside the residence, saw 2 deceased individuals laying in the foyer. It was clear to them that we've got a double homicide.
Homicide detectives arrive on the scene minutes later.
Once I entered the residence, I saw the 2 victims. Both of them were laying face down in the floor. Their hands were to their side, palms up, and blood had pooled around both of their heads. Based on the coagulation of the body fluids, it appeared that they had been down for quite some time. The first of the 2 victims appeared to be an older gentleman, and he had a folded white towel placed on the back of his head, and there appeared to be a gunshot artifact on the back of the towel. The second victim, the younger man, he had a gunshot wound to the back of the head, and there were white fibers on the back of his head, consistent with the same white towel.
Detectives find no sign of a murder weapon, but something else grabs their attention.
We found a ball cap, and inside that ball cap there was an unspent .45 caliber round. We weren't really sure if that was something that had been purposely left there at the crime scene or if that was done inadvertently.
An extensive search of the house finds no evidence of forced entry.
There were no signs of disturbance and tons of things of value that were still inside the home. Both wallets of the victims were found in the next room. That kind of took away from the idea that this was some sort of robbery or home invasion.
My professional opinion was it had all the hallmarks of an execution.
But if this was an execution, why were the victims targeted? And who were they?
A young lady by the name of Brandy that had discovered the bodies told us who she believed the victims to be. We were able to confirm with photo ID that the older of the 2, the homeowner, Carter Elliott, a local businessman. The second victim was a close personal friend of Carter Elliott, Timmy Wayne Robertson of Star City, Arkansas. Brandy indicated that she and Carter were in a relationship, and she knew Timmy Wayne because Timmy Wayne sometimes stayed with Carter.
Brandy agrees to go to the police station for questioning, while police reach out to the families of the two victims to tell them the terrible news.
I was in my apartment, and my mother came over. She said, "Oh, Ashley, I'm so sorry." And I said, "Who died?" And she said, "It's your father." I just crumbled to the ground and felt like I had been punched in my stomach, and all I could do was cry my eyes out. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew he had been shot.
From his humble roots in the tiny city of Helena, Arkansas, to owner of a multi-million-dollar chemical company, Carter Elliott was a self-made success story.
My father was an amazing man. He and my mom got married in El Dorado, Arkansas. My mom was 17 or 18, my dad 20. He didn't go to college, but he's just dedicated and a hard worker and very driven. My dad was really social, and he was a lot of fun. He was like social butterfly. He was just fun to hang out with.
Behind that larger-than-life personality was a man devoted to giving.
He wanted to help people. If you were around him or spent time with him, you were taken care of.
One of the people Carter helped was a young man who Carter met through a family friend.
Timmy Wayne had kind of a rough upbringing, and my dad took care of him the way he took care of everybody that he came across. He was like a brother. He stayed at my dad's house. We celebrated my birthday together. He went to my best friend's wedding. I mean, he was just part of the family.
Now, both Carter and Timmy Wayne are tragically gone. What's left is the mystery of why this happened and who could have done it.
I can't fathom what had happened or transpired to be shot in the back of the head, face down. It's just so unbelievable.
At the house, investigators continue combing the crime scene.
We dusted the house for latent fingerprints. We went through the trash. We're looking for anything in particular that might give us a legitimate lead.
Police also canvass the neighbors, hoping someone can point to a suspect or even when the shootings occurred.
Even though this was a very quiet neighborhood, not a single neighbor heard a gunshot, not a single neighbor heard a disturbance, so it really was quite baffling. We had no firm direction to go in as far as a potential suspect, and nothing that really told us when this potentially could have occurred. Anything was possible. I walked out of that house and I had as many questions as I did before I walked in. There were numerous things that just didn't fit. I needed to find out what was going on.
Coming up, detectives dig deeper.
There's so much that is bizarre.
People suspected some type of romantic relationship.
And discover troubling evidence.
He had a large hook that was in the ceiling.
We found adult diapers.
Before the truth blindsides everyone.
All of a sudden, we had a person that nobody really would suspect.
It sent a shockwave through the community.
I was terrified. I was traumatized.
I don't believe that was an accident.
Hours after discovering the murder of successful businessman Carter Elliott and his close friend Timmy Wayne Robertson, detectives are searching for more clues.
The little evidence we had was at the crime lab, but we had no firm direction to go in as far as a potential suspect.
Detectives bring in Brandy, Carter's girlfriend, who discovered the bodies.
When I investigate a homicide, I look at anybody who has a potential to be upset with the person that would be a motivation to end someone's life over.
If you don't mind me asking, how long have y'all been seeing each other?
I would say probably since last fall.
Are you and he pretty close?
Yeah, we hadn't even had a disagreement.
We also want to know whether or not they had a motive, means, and opportunity to potentially commit the crime themselves.
Would Brandy reveal anything to indicate she might be a suspect?
Trying to establish a timeline here when you last talked to Carter.
Saturday night at about, and I'm estimating, 11, 12 o'clock. I talked to him on the phone. I was in Memphis, Tennessee. He was at home, he said, in Conway.
Brandy says the next day, she and a friend headed to Carter's house when they got back from Memphis.
You know, I just opened the door. And his head is right there at my feet. And I immediately look up and I see another person, and I know exactly who it is. I mean, I see Tim Wayne all the time. I would recognize that body if I couldn't even, you know.
Detectives ask if Brandy knew who might want Carter and Timmy Wayne dead.
Do you have any opinions, ideas,
None.
anything, anybody you would suspect? Is there anybody that you can think of that may have had a grudge or was mad with Tim?
Not that I know of.
As detectives pull Brandy's phone records to confirm her story, they receive the results of the autopsy.
The medical examiner's report gave us an idea of a timeline that these two victims were killed late Saturday evening. In the case of Brandy Watkins, we were able to account for the fact that she was in Memphis, Tennessee, at the same time that the murders were committed.
Investigators now have an idea of when Timmy Wayne and Carter were murdered, but the autopsy report also reveals chilling details about how the two men died.
The medical examiner was able to tell us they were both flat on the floor when they were shot.
The autopsy report has one more valuable revelation. The killer used special bullets called Glazer Blue safety slugs.
This particular type of ammunition was a rarity. It is extremely expensive and is extremely devastating.
It is also the same type of bullet found in a hat at the crime scene.
I considered it a huge leap because when we found the offender, if they had a tie to this particular type of ammunition, that would be a good indicator to us that we were on the right track.
Armed with new information, police reach out to those who knew Carter and Timmy Wayne to see who might want either man dead. They start with Carter's ex-wife, Lark, who divorced him 10 years earlier.
Our investigation revealed that their breakup was fairly tumultuous.
But did Carter's ex-wife have any reason to harm him? Detectives bring Lark Elliott in for an interview.
She told us background information about the issues that they had when they were married and the breakup of their marriage.
They had been married for 18 years. I think my mother and father always had a kind of a roller coaster of a relationship. My dad was passionate and he was vocal, and at sometimes you couldn't gauge what was going to happen next. It was not a very fun time to experience.
Lark tells detectives she eventually divorced Carter in 1992. Now living in Salt Lake City, Lark remarried a doctor named Dick Conti.
Dick was a friend of my mother's family. And Dick had gone to medical school with my uncle, and that's kind of how their relationship started.
Lark denies any involvement in Carter's death. And when detectives ask Lark where she was the night of the murders, she says she was over 1,000 miles away in Utah.
We were able to determine based off of phone records and work schedules that she was in Salt Lake City, Utah when these crimes occurred.
With Lark ruled out as a suspect, detectives shift focus to Timmy Wayne Robertson. Was it possible that the 25-year-old friend of Carter was the intended target?
We interviewed the family of Timmy Wayne Robertson, all of Timmy Wayne's close friends, talked to girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, find out if there was anybody in particular that Timmy Wayne had issue with, any fights, any bad breakups, anything that indicated that he was the intended target, but nothing that involved Timmy Wayne just really rose to the level of somebody being mad at him enough to want to hurt him. Everything from an investigative standpoint kept telling us it had to be something to do with Carter Elliott.
Detectives are back to square one. Then they get a crucial tip from someone familiar with Carter's businesses.
We were told about a local businessman that had partnered with Carter in some business ventures. We found out sometimes he would have words with Carter.
Was it possible that two men were killed because someone targeted Carter over a business deal gone bad?
A bad business deal could be a reason to have committed these murders.
Something was going to happen. Something would break. I'm looking for business issues that led to two people being brutally murdered in West Conway.
Detectives investigating the murders of Timmy Wayne Robertson and Carter Elliott have just received a tip about a possible conflict between Carter and one of his business partners.
Danny Cook was a local businessman that had partnered with Carter. From what we were told, they had had words from time to time regarding the different businesses that they were involved in. We weren't sure at that point in time if this was maybe a business-related dispute or something like that.
Detectives bring the 38-year-old businessman in for an interview and ask about his relationship with Carter Elliott.
In the last 3 or 4 years, we'd actually started some business ventures together. We had quite a few of those together. I always paid all the bills.
We have to look at all of those different businesses that they were involved in, especially when it came to anything that potentially could have led to hard feelings.
Was it possible a disagreement over money between Danny and Carter turned deadly, with Timmy Wayne caught in the crossfire?
I can only imagine what's going through y'all's minds about this.
Potentially every human being on the face of this earth is a suspect.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Danny dismisses any notion of conflict with Carter.
Well, I'll just tell you this, Carter was my best friend. Like everybody's got a best friend. I'm sure y'all have a best friend.
Danny also tells police that the night of the murder, he was at home in bed, nursing an ailing stomach.
I've been in a lot of pain, and in the evenings I take pretty much enough medicine that knocks me out.
Detectives look into Danny Cook and Carter Elliott's business dealings.
We determined that we would seek a search warrant for financial records as far as transactions to see if there were any that would have been outside the norm.
But as investigators look into Carter and Danny's business, they uncover something much more personal about Danny's wife, Carla.
An employee of his suspected that Carter and Carla were having some type of romantic relationship. We had several different people tell us that it was water cooler talk. He was a single guy. He liked the ladies.
If the rumors are true, Danny's jealousy could be a motive for murder. Detectives question Carla about her relationship with Carter.
Carla indicated that they kind of flirted with each other, but she considered him more of a brother-type figure than anything else.
Danny also dismisses the rumors of an affair.
Danny Cook indicated that he did not suspect his wife at any point in time of having an inappropriate relationship with Carter.
What's more, both Carla and her son can confirm that Danny was at home in bed at the time of the murders.
Both appeared to have been at home during this period of time.
There was never any real evidence except for could have been. Then the law requires that you have something more than mere speculation.
After hitting a dead end with Danny Cook, investigators drilled deep into Carter's life, looking for anyone who could be a possible suspect.
We interviewed business partners, investors, former employees. We interviewed a group of men that gambled with Carter on poker. We went in every conceivable direction, trying to run down every potential motive, and we just kept coming up with nothing.
Detectives still have no solid leads 3 weeks into the investigation. And the failure to identify a suspect is taking its toll on the victims' families.
We were traumatized. Nothing in life is going to prepare you for murder. I don't think that's something you process.
Ashley also worries about her mother, Lark, who has just lost her ex-husband and is now struggling in her second marriage.
I would go back and forth between Utah and Arkansas to be with my mom. She and Dick were going separate ways, and they had broken up.
As the weeks pass, hopes of finding the killer start to fade.
I never liked to lose, but it's a complete whodunit. You start to wonder in the back of your mind, is this going to be the case that ultimately I'm not able to solve? I felt like the family of Timmy Wayne Robertson and Carter Elliott's family needed to have that closure. They needed to know what happened.
A killer may have gotten away with murder. That is a huge tragedy for these two men and for these two families.
Then, out of nowhere, a startling development rocks the case.
I had received a phone call that my mom had not shown up for work. My mom goes to work no matter what. I contacted the Salt Lake Police Department, and I asked the police department to go to her house. Her bed was unmade. Her closet was a mess. Things were out of order. Oh my gosh, where's my mother?
One month after Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson are gunned down, Carter's ex-wife, Lark, has disappeared in the middle of the murder investigation. Is she on the run from investigators? Or could she be another victim?
I did not know if my mother was alive. I didn't know what had happened. I had just lost my father. I wanted to know where my mother was.
In a panic, Ashley and her brother reach out to Lark's second husband, Dick Conti, whom she recently divorced. They call him at his cabin home outside of Carson City, Nevada.
I got him on the phone. Dick was crying and just profusely saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry."
Ashley wasn't expecting what she heard next.
He had taken my mom as a desperate act in hopes of getting her back. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew he had her. He kidnapped my mom. He allowed us to talk to my mother. My mother was just completely out of it. My mother told me that she was there against her will, and he was unstable.
Ashley is afraid of what Dick might do next.
Dick was crying and threatening to kill himself. He was just overwhelmed with emotion. Who knows what Dick was going to do?
Ashley frantically reaches out to Nevada police.
Ashley was panicked when she called us. She felt that her mother's life was in danger.
Ashley begs police to go to Dick's cabin in the Sierra Mountains, but warns them of Dick's threat of violence.
It's extremely dangerous for our first patrol officers going in. Somebody was on the phone with Dr. Conti trying to calm the situation, keep him calm. He spun this sort of unreal story about how she was a willing participant. This wasn't somebody that had a plan. He was acting more emotionally than he was logically. Eventually, they got him to surrender peacefully.
I was told my mother was safe, and I'm thankful for that.
Lark is rushed to the hospital as a precaution. She tells police how Dick had abducted her.
He had been lying in wait for her, and then she was held at gunpoint, and then he drugged her, putting her in the back of his truck, and drove from Utah back to his cabin. When she woke up, she was tied into a chair and held captive there for a few days. I was sort of surprised that a man that was considered a prominent emergency room physician in our area could do something like this.
Back at the Douglas County Sheriff's Station, Dick Conti says splitting up with Lark pushed him over the edge.
She didn't want to be married anymore. It just literally drove me crazy and devastated me, I guess.
It ultimately took about 5 hours to get the entire story, but he admitted everything that he had done related to the kidnapping and imprisonment of Lark.
I thought that somehow by having her come back to Carson, I could rekindle something that isn't there anymore.
But Dick casually mentions something else about Lark that gets detectives' immediate attention.
She recently had her ex-husband who was murdered.
What was his name?
Carter Elliott.
Carter Elliott. Do you know any of the circumstances behind that?
Only what she's told me.
Nevada police contact the Arkansas detectives investigating the murder of Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson.
I reached out to Conway, who confirmed that this was actually a crime that had been committed there.
When detectives hear what has happened to Lark, their investigation takes on new life.
The ex-wife of our victim here in Conway is kidnapped. That was too much of a coincidence, and cops will pretty much tell you that they don't believe in coincidences.
Did Dick have something to do with Carter and Timmy Wayne's death? If he would kidnap his ex-wife, what else could Dick be capable of? Arkansas detectives rushed to Nevada to interview Lark's ex-husband.
Have you ever met Carter Elliott?
No. I talked to him twice on the phone when I was at Lark's, just to pick up the phone and say hello.
The detectives asked Dick where he was the night of May 18th, when Carter and Timmy Wayne were murdered.
Do you have a calendar or something I can look at? I think I worked the night of May 15th. I got off and drove to my cabin in Duck Creek, Utah. I know I didn't leave there till the 21st.
Did you talk to anybody that you could think of?
I can't think of anyone that I,
That you recognized or might have recognized you?
Yeah.
He seemed very calm, given the situation that he was currently involved in. He came off as wanting to be helpful.
After Dick is charged with Lark's kidnapping, investigators are eager to search his cabin home for clues.
They were able to get a search warrant to go into Dick Conti's home. Dick Conti had this image that he was a successful emergency room physician, open the front door, and then you quickly realize that it was all a lie.
Detectives investigating the double murder of Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson are executing a search warrant at the cabin of Dick Conti. The Nevada doctor has just been arrested for kidnapping his ex-wife, Lark Elliott, whose first husband was Carter Elliott.
From the outside, it was very picturesque. Once you got inside the cabin, you realized that he lived kind of like a hermit.
It was very dirty. There was evidence that animals had been in and out of the house.
Then, police find something even more disturbing.
Everywhere in that cabin, you could pretty much reach a firearm.
The volume of weaponry we found, it was pretty extraordinary for one person. He had more firepower than our SWAT team had.
That isn't the most troubling discovery detectives make.
He had a large hook that was in the ceiling. We also found that there were hidden video cameras all over the house.
But nothing prepares detectives for what they find next.
Investigators found maps to Conway. He had notes related to Carter Elliott, his address, letters from Dick Conti to Lark that said that he was willing to do anything to get her back, and the books that discussed how to be a silent assassin.
The next discovery is even more damning.
We found blue tip laser safety slugs, the same type of ammunition that was used to kill both of our victims in Conway.
For Dick Conti to have the same type of ammunition really raised our suspicion that Dick Conti committed these homicides.
As police collect evidence from the cabin to take back to Arkansas, investigators begin to try to answer crucial questions. Did the Nevada doctor execute Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson in cold blood? And if so, why?
Dick Conti, by all reports, was a very competent emergency room physician. You have to stop and question what was the motive.
Detectives sit down with Lark to learn more about her second husband.
I mean, there's so much about him that is bizarre. He had, I felt like, 2 different lives. He portrayed himself to be this, a doctor upstanding in the community, when in fact his other life he had guns, everywhere, weapons everywhere, in his house. And that's not something that I wanted to be a part of, was his other life.
Lark also says Dick wouldn't leave her alone after she left him.
Conti had gone on a campaign. He begged Lark to come back through phone calls and sending her letters and cards. When the little things didn't work, then he would escalate.
Was it possible Dick Conti's obsession with Lark caused him to target her first husband, Carter Elliott?
Did you ever make any statements to anybody about you might consider reconciling with Carter Elliott?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you and Conti ever discuss Carter?
I was planning an engagement party for Ashley, and Carter, Ashley's father, was going to come to the engagement party. So he and I were talking on the phone about the party, and maybe that sparked some kind of jealousy in him, meaning that he was so possessive or obsessed with me. Maybe Conti's nature was that if I can't have Lark, nobody can have her.
The motive in this case was clear. Dick Conti was willing to do whatever it took to get Lark back. That meant taking out his competition. Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson got in his way.
Dick Conti had a motive for murder, but did he have the opportunity? He denies being in Arkansas that night.
Conti had told us that he was at another cabin that he owned in Duck Creek, Utah.
We were able to put together the last landline call he made at Duck Creek and then the first one he made again on Sunday.
Was that enough time for Conti to have killed two men over 1,300 miles away?
We seized his truck and we found adult diapers and a number of gas cans, which would have allowed him to drive to Arkansas back without having to stop for fuel or use the restroom.
We had the right gap in time that gave him enough time to drive to Conway and back.
The theory that Dick Conti is the killer is a compelling one, except for one major complication.
There was no physical evidence that put Dick Conti in that house that night. No hair, no fingerprints, no DNA left behind. And we had not been able to match any of the ballistics from the murder scene to any of the guns found in Dick's cabin.
The odds were stacked against us, but given all the circumstantial evidence that we had, we all believed Conti was responsible for killing these two people.
Dick Conti is jailed on kidnapping charges for abducting Lark.
Dick ended up pleading guilty to get a plea bargain. He got maximum time of 15 years for kidnapping my mom.
But prosecutors know that with good behavior, he could be released early. The pressure is on investigators to build a murder case against the doctor before he gets out.
The standard that we have to reach is beyond a reasonable doubt. A case like this is like a jigsaw puzzle. Reasonable doubt slips in pretty quickly.
9 years pass as investigators painstakingly seek out evidence to implicate Conti.
Even though I had been given other assignments, I continued to follow up, even if I had to do it on my own time.
Prosecutors hold off laying charges in hopes of building the strongest case possible. But Conti's release date is approaching.
Could the family handle us going to trial and him being found not guilty? That could happen.
If prosecutors fail, Lark and Ashley fear for what might happen to them if Dick walks free.
Dick murdered my father. He murdered Timmy Wayne. And if he could get to my mom, he's going to kill her too. I was petrified of Dick. I was convinced that Dick would kill us.
Almost a decade has passed since Carter Elliott and Timmy Wayne Robertson were brutally gunned down.
That long space of time felt like hell to me. You think it's over, but it's not over because you're just waiting for what's going to happen next.
The prime suspect, Dr. Dick Conti, has spent the last 9 years in a Nevada prison for kidnapping Carter's ex-wife, Lark. But he's about to be released.
My fear was there was a very good chance that if he was released, he could just disappear.
2 days before Dick is set to go free, prosecutors charge him with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The Nevada doctor is extradited to Arkansas to stand trial.
We had evidence, but, unfortunately, a lot of it was circumstantial. You always have a little bit of a knot in your stomach as a prosecutor when you've got a case like this, especially one that's high profile.
But before Dick Conti even steps foot in a courtroom, a surprise witness comes forward.
A cellmate of Dick Conti said that Dick told him that, yes, he had killed Carter Elliott, but that we couldn't prove it. And he also said they'll never find the murder weapon. To get information like this is always kind of a double-edged sword. Are they credible? Is a jury going to believe them?
big thing was making sure that the jury found it credible. And so that meant that they weren't going to get anything in return for their testimony.
At trial, prosecutors present their case to the jury.
Dick Conti was a scorned lover, and that was our theory of the case. You know, he was in love with Lark, and he was willing to do anything he needed to do to keep her. And if that meant that Carter Elliott was a threat, then he had to eliminate the threat. Timmy Wayne Robertson, unfortunately, became a victim as well.
In front of the families of Timmy Wayne Robertson and Carter Elliott, prosecutors reveal how the crime unfolded.
Dick Conti went to the door, dressed in police tactical attire, and yelled, "Police, search warrant." Once they opened the door, he burst in, ordered them to the ground, and then had them place their hands behind their back, placed the folded towels on the back of Timmy Wayne's head, and immediately executed him. And then he turned around and did the same thing to Carter Elliott.
Dick Conti had planned it down to every detail so that he would be certain that the only things that were left at the scene was what he intended to leave at the scene. Some sort of a calling card in the form of an unspent bullet. I don't believe that was an accident.
The jury hears from a host of witnesses, including Lark and Ashley, who testify about Dick's relationship with Lark and how he kidnapped her.
The kidnapping spelled out what kind of motive he had and what he was capable of doing.
The defense argued that with a lack of DNA, with a lack of fingerprints, with a lack of a murder weapon, a case was just merely circumstantial. And they also said that there was no reason for Dick Conti, to commit these crimes.
On January 22nd, 2013, after only 40 minutes of deliberation, Dick Conti is found guilty of 2 counts of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison.
I felt relief. I felt like justice had been served, and I feel like he received the punishment that he deserved.
There was a relief. That there was some level of accountability and justice for the family and for our community, but also justice is a pretty poor substitute for the loss of a loved one.
For Ashley Elliott, the memory of her father and friend are not in how their lives ended, but in how they were lived.
If people think of my dad, I hope they focus on the positive things that he did in his life. He left a legacy behind, which is my brother, and myself, and our children. And he was a wonderful man. And Timmy Wayne, I just will never forget Timmy Wayne's smile. And he was just gentle and kind and just as country as they come. And I loved that about him. And he was just there anytime I needed him.